The sky bleeds crimson as the last light dies beyond the western ridge. A line of dark riders emerges against the horizon, their silhouettes sharp as blade-edges guns, still smoking at their sides. Below them, an overturned stagecoach lies broken in the dust papers scattered like pale ghosts across blood-stained earth. This land remembers every bullet fired, every promise broken. Men of vision call it progress when they drive steel rails across ancient ground. Men of power call it necessity when they sign death warrants with gold-plated pens. But out here where justice comes from gun barrels and mercy is a luxury few can afford, truth leaves tracks deeper than any railroad. Some say an empire rises from ambition. Others know it rises from the bones of those who stood in its way. Tonight, as the desert holds its breath and stars turn cold, witness to what follows, one truth remains. Not all who seek vengeance want blood. Some want something far more dangerous, the truth. The sky bled crimson beyond the distant dunes, streaking the twilight with veins of dying light. Across the barren landscape, a line of riders emerged, 5 silhouettes, cutting through billowing dust, their horses' hooves thundering against parched earth. The lead rider's cloak billowed behind him like a battle flag, dark patches glistening wet in the fading light. Blood, fresh and still warm. The riders crested a ridge momentarily framed against the burning horizon before descending into shadow. Their guns strapped to leather holsters worn by years of use still carried the acrid smell of recently fired powder. Not one among them spoke. Only the rhythmic breathing of exhausted horses and the creaking of saddle leather broke the desert silence. Half a mile back, partially hidden by a cluster of withered mesquite trees, lay an overturned stagecoach. Its wooden frame had splintered upon impact, one wheel still spinning lazily in the evening breeze. Scattered papers danced across the ground like pale ghosts, some already half buried by the restless sand. Beside the wreckage knelt a young soldier, no more than 25, his uniform torn and stained with the evidence of violence. His hands trembled as they hovered over the face of another man, a fellow soldier whose vacant eyes stared skyward. The kneeling man's shoulders heaved with silent sobs, his fingers finally closing his friend's eyelids with gentle reverence. "Jenkins," he whispered, voice breaking on the name. "I'm sorry." The young soldier Elijah Cooper removed his cavalry hat and placed it over his heart. He remained there motionless as darkness claimed the land, and the first stars emerged overhead, cold and indifferent to the violence they witnessed below. 3 weeks later, the town of Redemption Creek stirred beneath the midday sun. Heat rippled above the dusty main street, distorting the silhouettes of wooden buildings that lined either side like sentinels. The saloon doors of the Widow's Whisper swung open, releasing the faint notes of a poorly tuned piano into the scorching air. Jackson Reeves paused at the threshold, eyes narrowing as they adjusted to the dim interior. At 45, his face had been carved by time and hardship into something resembling the surrounding landscape, weathered, unyielding, marked by deep lines that told of both laughter and sorrow. His dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was kept shorter than fashion, dictated a remnant of military habits never fully abandoned. The saloon fell quiet as he entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. Even the piano player's fingers stilled on the yellowed keys. Reeves acknowledged none of this, moving with deliberate calm toward the bar. Each step measured his spurs, making soft musical clicks against the wooden floor. "Whiskey," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to emerge from some deep, stone-lined well within him. "No ice." Behind the bar stood Sarah Hawkins, her hands steady as she poured the amber liquid. At 40, she carried herself with the dignity of royalty, despite or perhaps because of the lightweight metal mask that covered the left side of her face. Intricately crafted from burnished copper and silver, it curved around her eye and cheek, concealing burns that everyone knew the story of, but no one dared mention. "Long road?" she asked, sliding the glass toward him. Reeves lifted the whiskey. "Getting longer." Sarah's remaining visible eye, a striking shade of green, studied him with quiet intensity. "You found something?" It wasn't a question. In the 3 years since Sarah had lost her husband in what the sheriff called a tragic accident, she had developed an uncanny ability to read the unspoken. The fire that had claimed half her face had somehow sharpened her perception of what others tried to hide. Reeves drank, letting the liquor burn a path down his throat before responding. "Not here." The back room of the widow's whisper was cooler, shielded from the desert heat by thick adobe walls. A single window covered with a heavy curtain allowed just enough light to see by. Sarah locked the door behind them, then moved to a cabinet disguised as a bookshelf, retrieving a bottle considerably finer than what was served in the main room. "Jenkins is dead," Reeves said flatly, accepting a second glass. Sarah's hand stilled momentarily. "How? Ambush. Blackwood's men were waiting for us at Eagle Pass. And the others? Emma made it. Cut through the canyon while I drew them east." He removed a folded paper from his vest pocket, placing it on the table between them. "Elijah was with Jenkins. Don't know if he made it out." Sarah unfolded the paper, a map stained with what might have been coffee or blood showing property boundaries throughout the territory. Sections had been marked in red ink with names and dates scribbled in the margins. "This is what they were protecting?" she asked, voice tight with controlled emotion. "One of many. There were documents, Sarah, land deeds, records of payments to judges, sheriffs, territorial officials." Reeves leaned forward, his eyes suddenly burning with an intensity that broke through his carefully maintained calm. "And execution orders. One with my father's name on it." Sarah's fingers tightened on her glass. "Maxwell Blackwood." She whispered the name like poison on her tongue. "The railroad was never just about connecting east to west," Reeves continued. "It's about who controls the land it crosses, who profits when towns rise from nothing, who decides which settlements live or die." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones, a signal. Sarah moved silently to unlock it, revealing Emma Reynolds' dust still clinging to her riding clothes, her face windburned from hard travel. At 35, Emma carried herself with the poised readiness of a weapon at rest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, revealing a slender neck and just visible beneath her collar, the edge of a small scar. A mark she never explained and no one dared ask about. Her eyes, a pale shade of blue that seemed almost colorless in certain light, took in the room in a single sweep. "We have a problem," she said without preamble, closing the door behind her. "Elijah's alive." Reeves straightened. "That's not a problem. It is when he's been captured." Emma placed her saddlebag on the table, extracting a brass spyglass. "Blackwood's men have him at the old mining camp north of Three Fingers Ridge. They're using him as bait." "For us," Sarah concluded. Emma nodded once. "They know we have the documents. They're expecting us to come for him." "And we will," Reeves said, his tone making it clear this wasn't open for debate. "That's suicide, Jackson." Emma's voice remained level, but her use of his first name betrayed her concern. "I counted at least 15 men, armed, professional." "You could get a good look at 15 armed men, but couldn't manage to help Elijah." The edge in Reeves' voice could have cut steel. Emma didn't flinch. "I was outnumbered, outgunned, and 3 days' ride from any help. I made the call to bring information back, rather than die beside him without purpose." The tension between them stretched taut as a bowstring. Sarah moved between them, placing a hand on each of their arms. "We need more than the 3 of us," she said quietly. Reeves' jaw tightened. "We don't have time to gather men we can trust." "We might not need to." Sarah turned to a worn, leather-bound ledger on her desk, flipping through pages of carefully noted transactions and names. "There's someone in town. Arrived yesterday. Asked questions about the railroad construction. A stranger—" Emma's hand drifted instinctively toward her holstered revolver. "Not exactly." Sarah found the page she was looking for. "He signed the guest register as Cooper, Elijah Cooper." Reeves and Emma exchanged sharp glances. "His father," Reeves concluded, "has to be." "Room 4, Sarah confirmed. "Paid for 3 nights in advance." Without another word, Reeves moved toward the door, his decision made. Emma sighed, collecting the documents and returning them to her saddlebag. "He's always been like this?" she asked Sarah. The masked woman's mouth curved in a sad smile. "Since the war, loyalty is his religion. It'll get him killed." "Perhaps, but it's why we follow him." Discernement. Room 4 was at the end of the narrow hallway above the saloon. Reeves knocked once, then stepped to the side, hand resting on his holstered Colt. Emma positioned herself on the opposite side, her own weapon drawn, but held low. The door opened a crack, revealing a sliver of a weathered face and one cautious eye. "Who's asking?" The voice was gruff, tinged with the same accent as Elijah's Georgia roots showing through despite efforts to conceal them. "Friends of your son," Reeves answered simply. A moment's hesitation, then the door swung wider. The man who stood before them was in his late 50s with the same lean build and sharp features as Elijah, though time had hardened what in his son remained soft. His right hand remained conspicuously behind the doorframe, likely holding a weapon. "My son's been missing 3 weeks," he said. "Army says he deserted his post." "The Army lies," Reeves replied. "May we come in?" The elder Cooper assessed them with a soldier's practiced eye, then nodded once he's stepping back. As they entered, Reeves noted the room's careful arrangement back to the wall-clear lines of sight to both window and door bedroll, placed for quick access. The habits of a man who expected trouble and knew how to meet it. "Name's Reeves. This is Emma Reynolds. Harrison Cooper." The man gestured to 2 wooden chairs while he remained standing. "Where's my boy?" Emma and Reeves exchanged glances before Reeves answered. "Captured by men working for Maxwell Blackwood." Cooper's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes hardened. "The railroad man. You know him, know of him, bought half the judges in the territory, gets what he wants one way or another." Cooper finally set aside the revolver he'd been holding, placing it on a small table within easy reach. "Why'd they take Elijah?" "We raided one of Blackwood's shipments," Emma explained, her voice clinical, detached. "Found documents that could destroy him. Land theft, bribery, murder. And they caught my son." "It wasn't a question," Reeves nodded. "We're going after him. Tonight." Cooper's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. "With what army? Just us. And you if you're willing. 3 against 15. Those are suicide odds." "4," came a voice from the doorway. They turned to find Sarah Hawkins standing there, her metal mask catching the late afternoon light streaming through the window. In her hands, she held a Winchester rifle, its stock polished by years of use. "This was my husband's," she said quietly, "before Blackwood had him killed for refusing to sell our land." Harrison Cooper studied her for a long moment, his eyes lingering on the mask before shifting to the rifle. "You any good with that?" Sarah chambered around with practiced ease. "Good enough." A moment of silence filled the room as Cooper considered their small band. Finally, he moved to a worn leather trunk at the foot of the bed, unlocking it to reveal an arsenal of weapons, not the standard issue of an ordinary citizen, but the carefully selected tools of someone who had spent a lifetime in conflict. "Elijah always did have a talent for finding trouble," he said, extracting a knife with a blackened blade and testing its edge against his thumb. "Gets that from his mother." Reeves allowed himself the briefest smile. "We leave at nightfall." The old mining camp lay nestled in a narrow valley, its abandoned structures casting long shadows in the moonlight. Once a bustling operation that had drawn men from across the country with promises of silver and fortune, it now stood as a ghost of failed ambitions, half-collapsed buildings, rusted equipment, and the skeletal remains of what had once been a processing mill. From their vantage point on the ridge overlooking the camp, Reeves surveyed the scene through Emma's brass spyglass. 4 guards patrolled the perimeter, moving with the disciplined precision of men with military training. Lanterns burned in 2 of the structures, the former assay office and what had once been the foreman's quarters. "See him?" Harrison asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Reeves adjusted the spyglass, focusing on the assay office. Through a dirt-streaked window, he could make out a figure slumped in a chair, head bowed. Even in the poor light, the familiar shape of Elijah's shoulders was unmistakable. "East building. Tied to a chair. 1 guard inside with him, 4 on patrol outside. That leaves 10 unaccounted for." Emma noted, her eyes scanning the surrounding terrain. "They could be anywhere." Sarah, who had been studying the camp with a quiet intensity, pointed to a collapsed tunnel entrance north of the main buildings. "There. Fresh boot prints leading in. The old mine connects to the assay office underground. They're not taking chances." Harrison nodded with grim approval. "Smart. If we attack from any direction, they have reinforcements waiting below. So we draw them out," Reeves decided, collapsing the spyglass and returning it to Emma. "Harrison, you and Sarah circle around to the east ridge. When you see my signal, create a diversion, something loud enough to pull the patrol in your direction." "And the signal?" Harrison asked. Reeves extracted a small tin from his pocket, removing what appeared to be a hand-rolled cigarette. When this hits the ground in front of the assay office, it'll burn bright green for about 10 seconds. That's your cue. Harrison raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. Army trick. Something Elijah came up with, Reeves admitted. Your son has a gift for turning ordinary things deadly. A flicker of pride crossed Harrison's weathered face. Always was clever with his hands. Emma and I will approach from the south, Reeves continued. Once the patrol is drawn away, we get to Elijah. In and out, quick and quiet. And if quiet fails, Sarah asked, checking the loads in her Winchester. Reeves' expression hardened. Then we make sure none of them live to report back to Blackwood. As Harrison and Sarah disappeared into the darkness to take their positions, Emma moved closer to Reeves, her voice pitched low. This isn't just about Elijah, is it? Reeves continued, checking his weapons, avoiding her gaze. He's one of ours. That's enough. Jackson. She rarely used his first name. The execution order. For your father. Is that clouding your judgment? His hands stilled. For a moment, the only sound was the distant call of a coyote echoing across the valley. When he finally looked at her, his eyes reflected the cold light of the stars overhead. My judgment's clear as desert air, he said quietly. Blackwood signed my father's death warrant because he stood against the railroad cutting through our land. Made it look like a military tribunal's decision during the chaos after the war. Used his connections to bury the truth. And now you have proof. Now I have proof. He holstered his revolver with practiced precision. But first we get Elijah. Emma studied him, her expression unreadable. And if we don't all make it out, then whoever does make sure those documents reach the territorial governor. Reeves reached into his coat, extracting a sealed envelope. The originals are here. Copies are with a lawyer in Santa Fe. If none of us make it, he's instructed to open them in 1 week's time. Emma took the envelope, securing it inside her jacket. A silent understanding passed between them, a contingency born of years, operating on the edges of civilization, where tomorrow was never guaranteed. 20 minutes, Reeves said, glancing at the position of the moon. Then we move. The approach to the camp required navigating a treacherous slope of loose shale that threatened to announce their presence with every step. Reeves led the way, testing each foothold before committing his weight, while Emma followed in his exact path, her movements so precise they seemed choreographed. The first guard came into view as they reached the edge of the camp, a tall man with a shotgun cradled in his arms, pacing a slow circuit around the assay office. From their position behind a collapsed ore cart, Reeves could now see directly through the building's window. Elijah was indeed inside, his head lolled forward in what might have been unconsciousness or worse. A second man stood over him, occasionally prodding him with the barrel of a revolver. Reeves removed the signal flare from his pocket, then paused, sensing Emma's sudden tension beside him. Following her gaze, he spotted what she had already seen: a third guard, previously hidden in the shadows of a nearby structure, lighting a cigarette. The brief flare of the match illuminated a face that caused Emma to inhale sharply. Winter Bishop. She whispered the name, carrying a weight of history Reeves couldn't fully decipher. The man was tall and lean, with the unhurried movements of someone completely at ease in volatile situations. Even from a distance, there was something distinctly predatory in his posture, the way he surveyed the camp, the casual placement of his hand near the elaborately engraved revolver at his hip. You know him? Reeves asked, though it was more confirmation than question. Emma's eyes never left Bishop as she replied, He leads a group called the Widowmakers, Hunters, Trackers, Killers for Hire. A pause then, almost as an afterthought. We crossed paths during the war. Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story, but Reeves knew better than to press. Everyone carried secrets from those dark years, things done in the name of survival or duty that couldn't bear the scrutiny of peacetime morality. Changes things, he asked instead. Emma's expression hardened into resolve. Only the body count. Reeves nodded, understanding perfectly. He struck a match against a stone, touching it to the end of the signal flare. The compound caught, immediately beginning to smolder with unusual intensity. With practiced precision, he flung it into the open area before the assay office, where it landed and burst into vivid emerald flames. The effect was immediate. The patrolling guard shouted in alarm, raising his shotgun. Inside the office, the man with Elijah moved to the window, momentarily silhouetted against the lantern light, a perfect target. From the eastern ridge right on cue came the crack of Harrison's rifle, followed almost instantly by the deeper boom of Sarah's Winchester. The guard at the window jerked backward, a spray of crimson misting the glass behind him. Outside, chaos erupted as men emerged from hidden positions, shouting contradictory orders. Bishop alone remained calm, drawing his revolver and directing two men toward the source of the rifle fire, while he himself moved with tactical precision toward the cover of a stone wall. "Now," Reeves commanded, and they burst from their hiding place, firing as they ran. Emma's shots found their marks with surgical precision. One guard dropped immediately, clutching his throat, while another spun from the impact of a bullet to his shoulder. Reeves fired twice, downing a third man who had emerged from the mine entrance, then crashed through the door of the assay office. Inside, the space was cramped and thick with the metallic scent of fresh blood. The guard lay crumpled beneath the window, half his face missing from Harrison's well-placed shot. Elijah remained tied to the chair, but his head had lifted at the commotion. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed quickly by something else: fear. "Trap!" He managed his voice raw, as if he hadn't used it in days. "Get out!" Before Reeves could react, the floor beneath them shuddered. A deafening crack split the air as support beams, deliberately weakened, gave way. The last thing he saw was Emma lunging toward Elijah as the floorboards splintered beneath them, plunging them into darkness. Pain arrived first sharp and insistent, followed by the taste of dust and blood. Reeves coughed, each spasm sending fresh waves of agony through his ribs. Opening his eyes revealed nothing but impenetrable darkness. He reached for his revolver, finding only an empty holster. "Emma!" His voice sounded wrong in his own ears, muffled by the ringing aftermath of the explosion. "Here!" Her response came from somewhere to his left, strained but steady. "Elijah's with me, breathing but unconscious." Reeves fumbled at his belt, finding his matchbox still intact. The small flame that blossomed from the struck match revealed their situation. They had fallen into one of the mine's tunnels, the entrance now blocked by debris from the collapsed floor above. Emma knelt beside Elijah, who lay unmoving on the packed earth. Blood matted his hair on one side, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. "Planned the whole thing?" Emma said, her eyes meeting Reeves across the small circle of light. "They knew we were coming." "Bishop," she nodded. "This is exactly his style. Patient, meticulous." The match burned down to Reeves's fingers, forcing him to drop it. In the returned darkness, he struck another, using it to light a small candle stub from his pocket, a habit from years of operating in uncertain conditions. With better light, he could now see the extent of their predicament. The tunnel extended in both directions, its timbers old, but still holding. To their right, the passage appeared to have collapsed some time ago. To the left, it continued into darkness. "Can you move him?" Reeves asked, nodding toward Elijah. Emma was already checking the young man's limbs for breaks. "Think so. Nothing seems broken, but he's been worked over pretty thoroughly." Her fingers probed a series of puncture marks on Elijah's arm. "And drugged. Morphine, probably." Reeves's jaw tightened. To keep him compliant during questioning? Or to ensure he couldn't escape on his own? Emma began untying the ropes that still bound Elijah's wrists, the skin beneath raw and bleeding. They wanted him alive as bait, but didn't care about his comfort. A distant rumble caused small cascades of dirt to sift down from the tunnel ceiling. Somewhere above, the battle continued. "Harrison and Sarah," Reeves said, moving toward the blocked passage. "They're still up there. And we're no use to them buried alive?" Emma's practicality cut through his moment of concern. "This tunnel has to lead somewhere. These mines were known for having multiple exit safety measures. After a collapse killed 20 men in 58. Reeves knew she was right. Standing, he winced as his ribs protested the movement. "I'll scout ahead. You stay with Elijah." "No." Emma's tone brooked no argument. "You're injured. I move faster. You guard him." Before he could object, she had taken the candle and moved down the tunnel, her silhouette quickly swallowed by the darkness. Reeves sank back down beside Elijah, checking the young man's pulse, rapid but steady. "Should have left me," Elijah mumbled, his eyes still closed. "Not our way," Reeves replied simply. "My fault. Told them things. Shame colored the barely conscious admission. They tortured you. No man holds out forever. Elijah's eyes fluttered open, unfocused from the drugs, but filled with self-loathing. Didn't even need to. Just the morphine. Started talking. Couldn't stop. Reeves placed a steadying hand on the young man's shoulder. What did you tell them? Everything. The documents. Santa Fe. The lawyer. Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. Bishop. He knows how to ask questions. Makes you want to answer. A chill settled in Reeves's gut that had nothing to do with the cool underground air. If Bishop knew about the lawyer in Santa Fe, Emma. He called, his voice echoing down the tunnel. No answer came. With careful movements that sent fresh pain lancing through his side, Reeves helped Elijah into a sitting position against the tunnel wall. Can you hold a gun? Elijah nodded weakly. Reeves removed a small derringer from his boot, his last remaining weapon, and pressed it into the young man's hand. Anyone comes through that isn't one of us, use it. Where are you going? To find Emma. The tunnel curved gradually to the left, descending deeper into the earth. With no light, Reeves was forced to navigate by touch, one hand trailing along the rough-hewn wall. The air grew progressively cooler and damper, suggesting they were approaching a water source, perhaps the underground spring that had supplied the mining operation in its heyday. He had traveled perhaps 100 yards when a faint glow appeared ahead. Moving cautiously now, he approached what appeared to be a small chamber where the tunnel widened. The light came from his own candle, now placed on a flat rock in the center of the space. Emma stood with her back to him, apparently studying something on the chamber wall. She didn't turn as he entered, though she must have heard his approach. Found a way out? He asked, voice echoing slightly in the larger space. Several. She still didn't face him. This junction connects to 4 different tunnels. One likely leads to the surface near the North Ridge. Something in her posture set alarm bells ringing in Reeves' mind. Then let's get Elijah and go. It's not that simple, Jackson. When she finally turned, her expression was carefully neutral, the face she wore when delivering bad news. We've been compromised. Elijah told them about the documents. About Santa Fe. I know. No. Emma reached into her jacket, removing not the envelope he had entrusted to her, but a small metal object that caught the candlelight, a badge intricately designed with a widow spider at its center. We've been compromised from the beginning. Reeves stared at the badge, recognition dawning slowly, then, all at once. The Widowmakers. She nodded once. Bishop recruited me 3 years ago, after the war, when I had nothing. No home, no future. All this time, not all of it was a lie, she interrupted, something almost like regret coloring her words. But Blackwood has my niece Jackson, my sister's only child. I don't have a choice. Reeves' hand moved instinctively toward his empty holster. I didn't take your gun, Emma said quietly. I'm not here to kill you, just betray us, to save the only family I have left. Her composure cracked slightly, revealing the conflict beneath. Bishop will be waiting at the north exit. He wants the original documents, and he wants you alive if possible. And if I refuse, Emma's eyes hardened, then Harrison and Sarah die. Elijah too. Bishop has men positioned throughout the mine. One signal from me, and they collapse the remaining tunnels. The weight of her betrayal settled over Reeves like a physical burden. For 3 years, Emma had ridden at his side, shared meals, and dangers saved his life more than once. He had trusted her with everything, including now their destruction. Why tell me this? He asked finally. Why not just lead me into the ambush? Something like shame flickered across her face. Because you deserve the choice. Surrender the documents, face Blackwood yourself, and the others go free. Bishop gave his word. The word of a widowmaker. Reeves couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. It's more than most get. Emma held out her hand. The envelope, Jackson. Please. For a long moment, neither moved. The candle between them guttered in a faint draft, shadows dancing across the chamber walls like restless spirits. Finally, Reeves reached into his coat slowly to avoid any misinterpretation and withdrew the sealed envelope. You know what this means, he said, not yet relinquishing it. What Blackwood's been doing. The lives destroyed. I know. No justification, No excuses, just acknowledgement. And you choose this anyway. Emma met his gaze unflinchingly. Family is all that matters in the end. You of all people should understand that. With deliberate care, Reeves placed the envelope in her outstretched hand. As her fingers closed around it, he spoke one last time, his voice low but clear in the underground chamber. When this is over, if I'm still breathing, I'll come for you. It wasn't a threat, but a promise delivered with the same calm certainty with which he approached everything. Emma nodded once, accepting it as her due. North Tunnel, she said, indicating the passage to their right. Half a mile to the exit. Bishop will be waiting. Reeves turned without another word, heading toward the designated tunnel. Behind him, Emma's voice echoed off the stone walls one final time. For what it's worth, Jackson, I'm sorry. He didn't look back. The tunnel gradually inclined upward, the air growing fresher as it approached the surface. Reeves moved steadily despite his injuries, his mind working through possibilities. Angles, options, all limited, none promising. The envelope Emma now possessed contained the original documents, yes, but not all the information they had uncovered. Some pieces Reeves had kept separate insurance against precisely this kind of betrayal. Not that it would help him now. The first hint of daylight appeared ahead, a faint grayish glow that suggested dawn had arrived during their time underground. As Reeves approached the exit, he could make out a figure silhouetted against the light, tall and unnaturally still. Winter Bishop. Even standing motionless, the man radiated lethal capability. His clothes were trail-worn but meticulously maintained, his posture relaxed yet alert. At his hip hung the ornate revolver Reeves had glimpsed earlier, the handle inlaid with what appeared to be ivory, the barrel engraved with intricate patterns that caught the early morning light. Mr. Reeves. Bishop greeted him, his voice cultured, almost pleasant. Your reputation precedes you. Reeves emerged fully from the mine entrance, squinting slightly in the dawn light. They stood on a small plateau overlooking the valley, the abandoned mining camp visible below. From this vantage point, he could see several bodies lying where they had fallen, but no sign of Harrison or Sarah. Where are they? He demanded. Bishop smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Alive for now, as promised to Ms. Reynolds. I want to see them. All in good time. Bishop extended his hand. The envelope first. Emma has it. A flicker of surprise crossed Bishop's face before he controlled it. Does she now? He seemed to reassess Reeves, finding something unexpected. Interesting. The sound of approaching horses drew their attention. From around a bend in the trail came 3 riders, Emma leading, followed by 2 of Bishop's men escorting Harrison and Sarah. Both appeared battered but defiant, their hands bound before them. Found these 2 trying to circle back to the camp, one of the escorts reported as they dismounted. Put up quite a fight. Sarah's visible eye found Reeves silently assessing his condition. The metal mask that covered half her face gleamed dully in the morning light, a smear of blood marking its lower edge. Harrison stood straight despite a nasty gash above his left eye, his gaze darting between Reeves and Bishop with tactical assessment. Emma approached Bishop, the envelope in her hand. She didn't look at Reeves or the others as she passed it over. All here, Bishop asked, weighing it in his palm. Everything we found, she confirmed. Land deeds, payment records, execution orders. Shukshurum. Bishop broke the seal, extracting several papers and scanning them quickly. His expression remained unchanged, but something in his posture suggested satisfaction. Mr. Blackwood will be pleased. He carefully returned the documents to the envelope, tucking it securely inside his coat. You've done well, Emma. If she took any pride in the praise, she didn't show it. My niece. Safe in Tucson as promised. One of my men will take you to her once we've concluded our business here. Bishop turned his attention back to Reeves. Which brings us to the matter at hand. We had a deal, Emma interjected. The documents for their freedom. Bishop regarded her with cool amusement. The deal was for Mr. Cooper and Mrs. Hawkins. Mr. Reeves, however, is a separate negotiation entirely. Reeves saw the moment Emma realized her miscalculation, the slight widening of her eyes, the tension that rippled through her shoulders. Whatever game she thought she was playing, Bishop had changed the rules. Blackwood wants him alive, she insisted. Alive, yes, but not necessarily intact. Bishop turned to his men. Take the others to the rendezvous point. Miss Reynolds will accompany you to collect her niece. As the men moved to comply, Emma stepped forward. This wasn't the agreement. Bishop's hand moved with blinding speed, backhanding her across the face, with enough force to send her staggering. The agreement is whatever I say it is. In the moment of distraction, Reeves made his move. Lunging forward, he drove his shoulder into Bishop's midsection, sending them both tumbling to the ground. The impact sent waves of agony through his injured ribs, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside as he grappled for Bishop's weapon. Around them, chaos erupted. Harrison, despite his bound hands, headbutted one of his captors with enough force to shatter the man's nose. Sarah used the distraction to throw herself sideways, knocking the second guard off balance. Emma recovered from Bishop's blow, drawing a small knife from her boot and cutting Harrison's bonds with a quick slash. Bishop and Reeves rolled across the rocky ground, each fighting for dominance. The assassin was strong, his technique refined by years of lethal practice. But Reeves fought with the desperate energy of a man with nothing left to lose, finally managing to slam Bishop's gun hand against a stone, forcing him to release the ornate revolver. The weapon skittered across the plateau, coming to rest near the mine entrance. Both men scrambled toward it, but a gunshot froze them in place. Emma stood holding the revolver, its barrel shifting between Bishop and his remaining men. Blood trickled from her split lip, but her hand was steady, her eyes cold with fury. "Nobody moves," she commanded. Bishop slowly raised his hands, his expression one of grudging respect. "Well played, Emma, though I'm curious where your loyalties truly lie." "With my niece." Her gaze flicked briefly to Reeves. "But there are lines even I won't cross. Blackwood will hunt you to the ends of the earth for this betrayal. Let him try." She tossed the revolver to Reeves, who caught it one-handed. "The envelope. Inside pocket." Bishop's eyes narrowed as Reeves relieved him of the documents. "You're making a mistake. All of you. Blackwood doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget." "Neither do I," Reeves replied, stepping back with the envelope secure in his possession once more. The distant thunder of approaching horses drew their attention to the trail below. At least a dozen riders were ascending the path at speed, reinforcements undoubtedly alerted by the gunfire. "We need to go," Harrison urged, having freed Sarah from her bonds. "Now." Reeves nodded, keeping Bishop covered as the others retreated toward the horses. Emma lingered, uncertainty written across her features. "Jackson, go!" He cut her off. "Find your niece. Get as far from here as you can." A complex emotion crossed her face, regret perhaps, or something deeper. "What about you?" "I'm finishing this." He nodded toward the documents in his hand. "One way or another." Understanding passed between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement of the complicated threads that bound their fates together. With a final nod, Emma mounted her horse and followed Harrison and Sarah down the back trail that wound away from the approaching riders. Left alone with Bishop, Reeves considered his options. The men would be upon them in minutes. He could kill Bishop, now a simple trigger, pull an end to the immediate threat. The man deserved it for his many crimes. But dead men told no tales. "On your feet," Reeves ordered, gesturing with the ornate revolver. Bishop rose slowly, his calculating eyes never leaving Reeves' face. "What now, Mr. Reeves? A final stand against overwhelming odds, heroic but foolish?" Now Reeves said, his voice as cold and unyielding as the mountains that surrounded them. "You're going to tell me everything you know about Maxwell Blackwood. Every weakness, every secret, every sin." A slow smile spread across Bishop's face, not of amusement, but of genuine appreciation for the audacity of the move. "And why would I do that?" Reeves pointed toward the riders approaching below now, close enough to make out details, the matching black dusters, the rifles gleaming in the morning sun. "Because those men aren't coming to rescue you," he said with absolute certainty. "They're coming to ensure your silence." For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed Bishop's composed features as he recognized the truth in Reeves's words. In the world of men like Blackwood, loose ends were never tolerated, especially those who knew too much. "I propose a temporary arrangement," Reeves continued. "Your knowledge for your life." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, punctuated by shouts as the riders spotted figures on the plateau. Bishop's gaze shifted between Reeves and the approaching threat, calculation visible in every line of his face. Finally, decision made, he extended his hand. It seems, Mr. Reeves, that we have a common enemy. Reeves didn't take the offered hand. Instead, he tossed Bishop a spare revolver from one of the fallen guards. Prove it. As the first riders crested the rise, Bishop spun and fired in one fluid motion, the lead man toppling from his saddle. Reeves moved to cover the ornate revolver, barking in his hand as he picked off a second attacker. Side by side, former enemies, now unlikely allies, they prepared to face the onslaught. Behind them, the sun cleared the eastern mountains, painting the valley in golden shadow, a new day dawning as uncertain and blood-soaked as the one before. In the distance, a plume of smoke rose from the direction of Redemption Creek, where another chapter of this unfolding story awaited. And somewhere between them and the horizon, Emma Reynolds rode with a choice to make, one that would ultimately determine not just her fate, but the future of the entire territory. The first act was ending. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days after the standoff at the mining camp, Redemption Creek stood unnaturally quiet in the midday heat. No piano music drifted from the widow's whisper. No merchants called their wares from wooden storefronts. Even the usual drunks had abandoned their posts at the hitching rails, leaving the town's main street eerily deserted. Sarah Hawkins stood at her saloon window, the curtain pulled just far enough to observe without being seen. Her metal mask caught the sunlight filtering through dusty glass, casting fractured patterns across the worn floorboards. Behind her, Harrison Cooper cleaned his rifle with methodical precision, each movement economical and practiced. "Anything?" he asked without looking up. "Nothing." Sarah let the curtain fall back into place. "Third day they've watched the town, not coming in, not leaving, waiting us out, or waiting for something else." They both knew what, or rather who, that something might be. Reeves had not returned from the mining camp. Neither had Bishop. Whether they had escaped together, died together, or killed each other remained unknown. The only certainty was that Blackwood's reach extended far beyond what any of them had imagined. Harrison set his cleaned rifle aside, reaching for a worn leather-bound journal on the table beside him. Elijah's journal recovered from his saddlebag. The younger Cooper remained upstairs, his body slowly purging the morphine that had kept him compliant during his captivity. The withdrawal had not been gentle. "My boy's still asking for her." Harrison's voice carried no judgment, only concern. Sarah nodded. "In his fever. Calls for Emma. She saved his life once, in Tucson." Harrison's weathered fingers traced the journal's cover. "Never told me the whole story, just that he owed her. And now he needs to heal, then decide what debt remains." Sarah moved from the window to the bar, pouring 2 measures of whiskey. The clink of glass against glass sounded over loud in the empty saloon. "And you," she asked, sliding one glass toward Harrison, "what will you decide about Emma?" Harrison considered the amber liquid before answering. "Betrayal for family. I understand it. Don't condone it. Don't condemn it either." He drank, then set the glass down with careful deliberation. "But if she returns, I'll hear her reasons before making judgment. And if Reeves returns," a tight smile creased Harrison's face, "his judgment might not be so measured." The conversation ended abruptly at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Sarah returned to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer into the street. Her visible eye widened slightly. "Riders," she said, her voice suddenly tense. 5 of them, not Blackwood's men." Harrison was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "How do you know?" "Because they're led by a woman." The desert stretched endlessly under the merciless sun heat, rippling above the sand like phantom water. Emma Reynolds rode with single-minded determination, her horse pushing through exhaustion just as she pushed through her own. Behind her rode 4 others, women ranging in age from barely 20 to well past 50, each bearing the unmistakable marks of lives lived hard and choices made harder. Her niece Lily rode directly behind her. At 16, the girl was all sharp angles and watchful eyes, her childhood stolen by circumstances beyond her control. She hadn't spoken more than a dozen words since Emma had found her in Tucson, locked in a room above a seamstress shop. Not a prisoner exactly, but certainly not free. 2 miles ahead called Vera, the oldest of their group. Her voice, like her face, had been weathered by decades in the unforgiving Southwest. "We should water the horses before approaching." Emma nodded her agreement. They had pushed hard from Tucson, avoiding main trails and traveling mostly at night. 3 days of cautious progress, constantly watching for pursuit. Bishop's men, Blackwood's men, perhaps even Reeves himself, all potential threats now. They stopped at a small spring hidden among a cluster of boulders. As the horses drank gratefully, Emma studied the distant silhouette of Redemption Creek. From here it looked peaceful, almost welcoming a lie she knew all too well. "You sure about this?" Vera asked, coming to stand beside her. "That town's likely crawling with Blackwood's men by now." "I'm sure. Because of the documents, or because of him?" Emma's eyes remained fixed on the distant town. "Because I started something. Need to finish it." Vera snorted softly. "Started, girl, you threw a torch into a powder room. Blackwood won't just be angry. He'll be scorched earth." "I know. And these women, they followed you out of loyalty, not suicide." Emma finally turned to face the older woman. "They followed me because Blackwood destroyed their lives too. Husbands killed, land stolen, daughters taken. They deserve a chance at justice." "Justice?" Vera spat the word like something bitter. "Fancy name for revenge. Call it what you want. We're going in." As the others prepared to remount, Lily approached her aunt, her slender fingers nervously twisting a strand of dark hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Emma's sister that it made her chest ache. "The man we're meeting," Lily said, her voice soft but steady. "He's the one you betrayed." Emma's hand stilled on her saddle. "Yes. Will he kill you?" The question, delivered with such matter-of-fact calmness, spoke volumes about the world Lily had grown up in. A world where death was neither distant nor abstract, but a constant companion lurking just beyond the firelight. "If he wanted me dead, he wouldn't wait for me to ride to him," Emma replied honestly. Lily considered this with a seriousness that belied her years. "Is he a good man?" Emma swung into her saddle before answering. "Better than most. Better than me, certainly." "That's not saying much." A ghost of a smile touched the girl's lips, the first Emma had seen since Tucson. "No," Emma agreed, returning the smile with a sad one of her own. "I suppose it isn't." The interior of the Widow's Whisper was dim after the harsh glare of midday. Though Emma's eyes adjusted quickly, a skill honed through years of moving between light and shadow, both literal and figurative. Sarah stood behind the bar, her masked face unreadable. Harrison remained seated at a corner table, his rifle resting casually across his lap. Emma entered alone, having left Vera and the others with Lily at the edge of town. Her hands remained visible away from her weapons, a gesture of good faith, though she harbored no illusions about her welcome. "Sarah," she greeted simply. "Harrison." "Bold move showing your face here." Harrison observed, neither friendly nor hostile, merely stating a fact. "Necessary one." Emma remained near the door, making no move to approach either of them. "Is Elijah alive?" "No, thanks to the morphine Bishop pumped into him." Harrison's tone hardened slightly. "But yes, he'll live." Relief flickered briefly across Emma's features before she controlled it. "And Reeves?" "Missing?" Sarah answered, her single visible eye studying Emma with calculating intensity. "Along with Bishop. 3 days now." Emma processed this information, her expression giving nothing away. "Blackwood's men, watching the town, 5, maybe 6 of them, camped at the ridge overlook, more likely patrolling the outskirts." Sarah poured 3 glasses of whiskey, pushing one across the bar toward Emma. "Which you'd know if you were working with them." Emma approached, cautiously accepting the offered drink as the tentative peace offering it was. "I'm not." "Yet you rode with Bishop," Harrison pointed out. "Wore his badge." "I did what was necessary to protect my family. And now," Emma drank, welcoming the burn, "now I'm here to warn you. Bishop wasn't Blackwood's only enforcer. There are others. They call themselves the Widowmakers." "Dramatic name," Sarah commented dryly. "Earned it." Emma set her empty glass on the bar with deliberate care. "They're specialists, trackers, killers. Most are former military scouts, bounty hunters, or worse. They hunt in groups of 3 to 5 coordinate over long distances using a system of signals, and they never ever stop once they have a target." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "You sound like you know them well." "I was one of them." No pride in the admission, only cold fact. For 2 years after the war, when I had nothing and no one, Bishop found me half dead in a border town, offered me purpose. By the time I learned what that purpose truly meant, I was already blooded. And now, Sarah's question carried weight beyond its simplicity. Now I've brought 5 former widowmakers with me. Women who left the group for various reasons. Women who have their own scores to settle with Blackwood. Harrison and Sarah exchanged glances, silently evaluating this unexpected development. Finally, Harrison spoke. "Why should we trust you after what happened at the mine?" "You shouldn't," Emma answered simply. "But Blackwood's men will be here in force by nightfall." Bishop would have sent a final message before the standoff, reporting that the documents were recovered but compromised. Standard protocol. "Those documents are safely hidden," Sarah said. "Doesn't matter. Blackwood will raise this town to ensure nothing remains." Emma leaned forward, urgency breaking through her composed exterior. "I've seen it before. Entire settlements wiped out, evidence, buried witnesses eliminated. He can't afford loose ends." Before either could respond, the saloon doors swung open. Framed against the bright light stood Elijah Cooper, pale and unsteady, but undeniably alive. His eyes still shadowed with the remnants of his ordeal, fixed immediately on Emma. "I heard your voice," he said simply, his hand braced against the doorframe for support. "Had to see for myself." Emma straightened her face, carefully neutral, despite the turmoil visible in her eyes. "Elijah." Harrison rose, moving to his son's side. "You should be resting." "Done plenty of that." Elijah took a faltering step forward, refusing his father's supporting arm. His gaze never left Emma. "Why are you here to help?" she answered, knowing how hollow it must sound after her betrayal. "Like you helped before selling us out to Bishop." Emma accepted the accusation without defense. "Yes, like that." Anger flashed across Elijah's drawn features. "He cut Jenkins' throat while I watched. Did you know that made me listen to him drown in his own blood?" "I didn't know." It wasn't an excuse, merely acknowledgement. "But you knew what Bishop was, what he did." "Yes." Elijah's hand drifted to his side where his revolver would normally rest. Finding nothing, his fingers curled into a fist. "Give me one reason I shouldn't kill you where you stand. Because I'm not the only one who betrayed you." Emma held his gaze steadily. "And I'm the only one who can tell you why Reeves led you into that ambush in the first place." The statement landed like a physical blow, momentarily robbing Elijah of words. Harrison stepped forward, rifle suddenly raised. "Choose your next words very carefully," he warned. Emma remained calm despite the weapon aimed at her chest. "The night before the raid, Reeves met with Bishop at the canyon crossroads. I saw them. They spoke for nearly an hour. When Reeves returned to camp, he changed our approach plan." "Lies," Elijah snarled, finding his voice again. "Reeves wouldn't. Ask yourself why he insisted on taking that particular route when 3 others were clearer and safer." Emma interrupted. "Why he sent you and Jenkins ahead as scouts when that was never the plan before." Doubt flickered across Elijah's face, the first crack in his certainty. Sarah moved from behind the bar, placing herself between Emma and Harrison's rifle. "What would Reeves gain from such a betrayal?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tension. "The one thing he wanted more than anything," Emma replied quietly. "A direct line to Blackwood." Understanding dawned in Sarah's expression. "The execution order. For his father." "Revenge." Emma nodded. "Blackwood never travels without a small army of guards. Never makes himself vulnerable. But Bishop could arrange a meeting for the right price. And we were the price," Elijah concluded, his voice hollow. "Me and Jenkins." "Just Jenkins." Emma's gaze softened with something like regret. "You were supposed to escape with a story of ambush and betrayal. Something to make Blackwood believe Reeves had lost everything and was no longer a threat." "But Jenkins fought back," Harrison guessed. "Changed the plan." "Yes." Emma's confirmation was barely audible. "He wouldn't leave Elijah. Died protecting him." Silence fell over the saloon, heavy with the weight of revealed truths and shifting loyalties. Elijah sank into a chair, the last of his strength seemingly drained by this new betrayal. His father lowered the rifle slowly, his weathered face troubled. "If what you're saying is true," Sarah said finally, "then Reeves and Bishop could be working together even now." "Possible," Emma acknowledged, "but there's something you should know about Bishop. He serves Blackwood, but he's not loyal to him. He collects secrets like others collect bounties." Information is his true currency. And Reeves offered him better payment, Harrison concluded. The question, Sarah interjected, is what happens now? If Blackwood's men are coming in force, we need to leave, Elijah said, his voice stronger despite his pallor. Abandon the town. Emma shook her head. They'll hunt you down, one by one. Your only chance is to make a stand. Here, together. With you and your, what did you call them, former widowmakers? Harrison's skepticism was palpable. 5 women against Blackwood's army. Sarah added, though her tone suggested she was already calculating odds and positions. 5 women who know how Blackwood's enforcers think, how they move, how they kill. Emma straightened to commander, despite her uncertain standing. And we won't be alone. Meaning, Harrison prompted, meaning I sent a telegram before coming here, to every settlement within 50 miles that suffered under Blackwood's expansion. Told them what we found, what we know. A cold smile touched Emma's lips. People who've lost everything tend to ride hard for a chance at justice. Sarah exchanged a long look with Harrison, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, she turned back to Emma. How much time do we have? Sunset. Maybe sooner. Sarah nodded once decision made. Then we have work to do. As afternoon's shadows lengthened across Redemption Creek, the town transformed from abandoned ghost to fortified stronghold. Under Sarah's direction, storefronts were barricaded sightlines, established escape routes secured. Harrison positioned snipers, including Vera, whose steady hands and sharp eyes belied her years at key vantage points overlooking the main approaches. Emma moved between groups, her familiarity with Widowmaker tactics proving invaluable as they prepared for the coming assault. If the townsfolk harbored doubts about following her instructions, they kept them private desperation, making for strange alliances. At the edge of town, Elijah supervised the construction of simple but effective traps, trip lines, hidden pits, modified hunting snares. His hands still occasionally trembled from morphine withdrawal, but his mind remained sharp, innovating with limited materials and time. Emma found him there as the sun began its final descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in brilliant oranges and deep purples. He didn't look up as she approached, continuing to adjust a complex arrangement of wire and triggers. Clever design, she observed, keeping a respectful distance. Learned from an Apache scout during the war? Elijah replied, his focus on his work. Simple but effective. Triggers a shotgun blast at ankle height when the wire is tripped. Emma nodded appreciatively. Bishop taught similar setups, though his usually involved more mess. Elijah finally looked up, studying her with eyes that had aged years in the span of days. Why did you come back? Really? Told you. To help. Not good enough. He stood, wiping dust from his hands. You could have taken your niece and disappeared. Started over somewhere Blackwood couldn't find you. Emma considered her response carefully, knowing platitudes would only deepen his distrust. Because running doesn't end anything. Just postpones the inevitable. And because I owe debts that can't be paid from a distance. Elijah's expression hardened. To Reeves, the man who sold Jenkins to Bishop. To Jenkins, she corrected quietly. To you. To everyone caught in the crossfire of men like Blackwood. For a long moment, Elijah simply looked at her, searching for deception and finding only complicated truth. Finally, he nodded once, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. We've got maybe 20 guns total, he said, returning to practical matters. Not counting your women. 25 against what will likely be 50 or more, Emma calculated. Not good odds. Never are. A ghost of Elijah's former idealism flickered in his eyes. But right makes might, isn't that what they say? Emma's smile held no humor. Never seen it work that way myself. No, he agreed, his brief optimism fading. Suppose not. Aha. The conversation ended as a lookout's whistle cut through the evening air. 2 short bursts, a signal they had established for approaching riders. Emma's hand moved instinctively to her holstered revolver. From the north, Elijah noted, already moving toward the town center. Could be Blackwood's advanced scouts. They found Sarah and Harrison already positioned on the porch of the Widow's Whisper rifles, ready but not yet raised. From their elevated position, they could see a cloud of dust approaching along the northern road, riders moving at speed toward the town. How many? Emma asked, joining them. Too much dust for a small group, Harrison observed. 20, maybe more. Too early for Blackwood's main force. Emma frowned. He'd wait for full dark. As they watched the lead riders emerge more clearly from the dust cloud, at their head rode a man whose silhouette was immediately recognizable despite the distance, broad-shouldered, sitting straight in the saddle with military bearing. Reeves, Sarah breathed, lowering her rifle slightly. And he's not alone. Harrison added, his tone caught between hope and suspicion. Indeed, the riders behind Reeves appeared to be a ragtag collection miners, farmers, townspeople armed with whatever weapons they could muster. Their approach lacked military precision, but made up for it with determined purpose. He found help, Elijah said, a note of wonder creeping into his voice, despite his recent disillusionment. Emma's expression remained guarded. Or brought something worse. As the riders drew closer, another figure became visible beside Reeves, tall, lean, dressed in black. Winter Bishop rode as Reeves's equal, not his prisoner, his distinctive, ornate revolver gleaming at his hip. "Bishop," Emma whispered instinctively, stepping back into the shadows of the porch. The approaching force slowed as they reached the town's edge, clearly noting the barricades and defensive positions. Reeves raised a hand, bringing the column to a halt, before continuing forward alone, Bishop remaining conspicuously with the main group. As Reeves approached the widow's whisper, his eyes took in the assembled defenders, lingering briefly on Emma before settling on Sarah. His clothes were trail-worn, face sunburned and stubbled, with several days' growth of beard. A fresh scar marked his left cheekbone, still red and healing. "You've been busy," he observed, dismounting with the careful movements of a man nursing hidden injuries. "So have you," Sarah replied, nodding toward the waiting riders. "Found friends. Found people with reasons to fight." Reeves climbed the porch steps, acknowledging Harrison and Elijah with brief nods. His gaze hardened as it returned to Emma. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Likewise," she replied evenly. "She brought help," Sarah interjected before tension could escalate. "Former widowmakers. Women with skills we need." Reeves' expression revealed nothing. "And Bishop, what will you do when you see him?" "Depends," Emma answered. "Is he still hunting me?" "He's hunting Blackwood now." Reeves turned to address the entire group. "Things have changed. Blackwood didn't just take land and lives. He's been selling military secrets to foreign investors. Information about frontier defenses, troop movements, supply lines." "Treason," Harrison concluded grimly. "With proof," Reeves confirmed. "Bishop kept records of every transaction. Insurance, he called it." "And you trust him?" Elijah's voice cut through the conversation, sharp with disbelief. "After what he did to Jenkins?" "To me?" Reeves met the younger man's accusing stare without flinching. "Trust isn't required. Only mutual interest." "Which is what exactly?" Sarah asked. "Survival first. Justice if we're lucky." Reeves looked back toward the waiting riders. "These people have all suffered under Blackwood's expansion. Lost homes, family livelihoods. They've been waiting for a chance to fight back." "And Bishop?" Emma pressed, still skeptical. "What's his interest?" "Blackwood tried to have him killed after the mine." Reeves' expression darkened. "Bishop doesn't forgive betrayal." The irony of this statement hung heavy in the air, acknowledged but unaddressed. After a moment, Sarah broke the silence with characteristic practicality. "How many men did you bring?" 23, most with military experience, all with reasons to fight." Reeves surveyed the town's defenses with professional assessment. "Bishop thinks Blackwood will send at least 60 men, well-armed, disciplined." When Harrison asked, "Tonight, an hour after sundown, most likely." Reeves turned to Emma. "Your widowmakers, are they still loyal to Bishop?" "No, each has her own reasons to hate Blackwood." "Good, because we'll need every gun." As the conversation continued, focusing on defensive positions and tactical approaches, Emma slipped away from the group. Moving through deepening shadows, she made her way to the edge of town where Bishop waited with the newly arrived fighters. He sat his horse with effortless grace, seemingly unbothered by days in the saddle. Upon seeing her approach, a slow smile spread across his face. The predatory expression she remembered all too well. "Emma," he greeted her, his cultured voice carrying a hint of genuine pleasure. "Reeves said you might be here." "Bishop." She stopped several yards from his horse, maintaining safe distance. Heard you had a change of heart. Change of employer, more accurately. He dismounted smoothly, keeping his hands visible, a courtesy between professionals. Blackwood's loyalty extends only as far as his ledger. A disappointing discovery after years of service. And now you fight with those you once hunted. Temporary alignment of interests. Bishop studied her with calculating eyes. Much like you and Reeves, I imagine. Emma didn't deny it. The women I brought, they know you. Former colleagues, yes. Bishop's smile thinned. I trained most of them myself. They haven't forgotten. I would hope not. My lessons were designed to be memorable. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Tell me, Emma, does your niece still have nightmares about the men I sent to collect her? Emma's hand moved to her revolver fingers, tightening around the grip. Don't speak of her. You misunderstand. Bishop raised his hand slightly, a placating gesture, belied by the cold amusement in his eyes. I merely wonder if she knows the full extent of her aunt's activities. The lives ended, the blood spilled. Does she know what you did in Tucson 3 years ago? That's enough, Bishop. The new voice came from behind Emma Reeves, his approach silent despite his injuries. His expression was carefully neutral, but the tension in his shoulders spoke volumes. Just reminiscing with an old colleague, Bishop replied, smoothly stepping back. No harm intended. Save it for Blackwood's men, Reeves ordered. We need to finalize positions before dark. Bishop inclined his head in mock deference before returning to his horse. As he mounted, he offered Emma one final observation. We're all drawing lines in blood tonight, my dear. The question is whether any of us will recognize ourselves when dawn comes. With that, he rode toward the town center, leaving Emma and Reeves alone in the gathering dusk. For a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of shared history and recent betrayals hanging between them like a physical barrier. I should kill you, Reeves finally said, his voice devoid of emotion, a statement of fact rather than threat. Many should, Emma acknowledged. Why haven't you? Reeves considered the question, his eyes tracking Bishop's retreating figure. Because I understand choosing survival over principle, and because we need every gun tonight. And after is a luxury none of us may have. He turned to face her fully. You brought your niece here. She's with Vera at the church, protected. No one's protected tonight. Reeves started back toward town, then paused. For what it's worth, I never blamed you for choosing family over loyalty. But you'll never trust me again, Emma concluded. Trust is earned through consistency, Emma. You taught me that. A ghost of something almost like regret crossed his features. Now we'll see if either of us remembers the lesson. Night descended on Redemption Creek like a shroud, stars emerging in brilliant clarity against the velvet darkness. No lamps burned in the town, no fires offered comfort against the desert's cooling air. Only moonlight illuminated the tense faces of defenders, positioned throughout the settlement, their weapons ready, nerves stretched taut with anticipation. In the Widow's Whisper, now serving as their command center, Sarah Hawkins studied a rough map of the town spread across the bar. Beside her, Harrison and Reeves discussed final preparations in low voices, occasionally indicating positions on the makeshift diagram. Bishop's men will take the north approach, Reeves explained, tracing the route with his finger. My riders cover the east and south. That leaves the western trail. My Widowmakers will handle it, Emma said, joining the conversation from her position near the window. It's the least likely approach, too exposed, too little cover. Which makes it the one Blackwood might choose, Bishop added, emerging from the shadows at the back of the room. His sudden appearance startled several of the defenders, a reminder of how silently he could move when he chose. He favors the unexpected. We've placed Elijah's traps along all approaches, Harrison noted, deliberately ignoring Bishop's intrusion. Should slow their advance at least. Sarah tapped the map where the town's water tower stood. This remains our highest vulnerability. If they take it, they control the best vantage point. Already addressed, Bishop assured her, his cultured voice carrying a note of professional pride. 2 of my best marksmen are positioned there. Anyone attempting to climb will meet an unfortunate end. Further discussion was interrupted by a soft whistle from outside, 3 notes in descending pitch, their signal for approaching riders. Emma moved immediately to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the shutters. Movement to the east, she reported. No lanterns. They're coming dark. Reeves joined her, studying the distant shadows that shifted against the starlit desert. Earlier than expected. At least 40 riders, possibly more. And those are just the ones we can see, Bishop added with cold certainty. Blackwood always holds forces in reserve. Throughout the town, defenders moved to their assigned positions with quiet efficiency. On rooftops, behind barricades within darkened buildings, a network of resistance prepared through long hours of planning and guided by the combined experience of military veterans and professional killers. In the church at the town's western edge, Vera positioned herself at a window, her rifle resting on the sill. Behind her, Lily and several other non-combatants huddled in the relative safety of the building's stone walls. Will they come here? Lily asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Not if we do our jobs right. Vera answered, her attention never leaving the moonlit landscape beyond the window. But if they do remember what I showed you? Lily's fingers closed around the small derringer Emma had given her, a last resort. None of them spoke up directly. At the town's northern approach, Elijah knelt beside his most elaborate trap, a network of tripwires connected to multiple shotguns positioned at strategic intervals. His hands moved with practiced confidence despite the lingering tremors of withdrawal, making final adjustments to tension and triggers. Ready? Harrison asked, crouching beside his son. Elijah nodded, eyes fixed on his work. One rider trips the first wire, sets off a chain reaction. Should take down at least 5 or 6 in the initial confusion. Harrison placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a brief gesture of pride and concern combined. Find cover as soon as it triggers. Don't wait to confirm. I know. Elijah finally looked up, meeting his father's gaze. This isn't my first fight. No, Harrison acknowledged, but I aim for it not to be your last. From their position atop the widow's whisper, Reeves and Sarah observed the approaching forces. What had initially appeared as formless shadows gradually resolved into distinct groups. Riders splitting into multiple columns, approaching from several directions simultaneously. They know the town's defended, Sarah observed, coming in tactical formation. Bishop was right, Reeves confirmed grimly. Blackwood sent professionals. The riders continued their advance, now close enough that the soft sounds of hoofbeats and creaking leather carried on the night air. Still, they maintained distance, forming a loose perimeter around the town, rather than charging directly in a siege formation. They're stopping, Sarah noted, tension evident in her voice. Why? Before Reeves could answer, a single rider detached from the eastern group, approaching at a walk. As he entered the edge of town, moonlight revealed an older man in an immaculate black suit, his white hat a stark contrast against the night. Even at a distance, his commanding presence was unmistakable. Blackwood? Reeves breathed instinctively, tightening his grip on his rifle. In person, Sarah whispered, genuine surprise coloring her words. He never exposes himself. Indeed, Maxwell Blackwood's appearance on the battlefield represented a significant deviation from his usual methods. At 60, he cut an imposing figure, despite his age back, straight shoulders, squared face set in lines of arrogant confidence. He rode to the center of the main street and stopped, making no effort to seek cover. Reeves? He called, his voice carrying easily through the quiet night. I know you're here. You and Bishop both. Let's discuss terms before this becomes unnecessarily messy. Reeves exchanged glances with Sarah, who shook her head in silent warning. Ignoring her concern, he moved to the edge of the roof. No terms, Blackwood. He replied, his voice equally clear without shouting. You've taken enough. Blackwood chuckled, the sound chilling in its genuine amusement. Taken I've built, created, brought civilization to wilderness. The railroad means progress, Reeves. Progress always has costs. Progress doesn't require murder. Unfortunate necessities. Blackwood made a dismissive gesture. Your father understood that in the end. He died with dignity, at least. More than I can offer you tonight. The mention of his father sent a cold rage through Reeves, momentarily clouding his tactical judgment. He raised his rifle, sighting down the barrel at Blackwood's chest, an easy shot at this distance. Before he could fire, a hand closed over the barrel, pushing it gently but firmly downward. Bishop stood beside him, seemingly materialized from nowhere. Not yet, he murmured. He's wearing armor beneath that suit, and he's not alone. As if confirming Bishop's assessment, The shadows behind Blackwood shifted, revealing two men with rifles trained on Reeves' position. Expert marksmen positioned to eliminate any threat to their employer. One last chance, Reeves, Blackwood called, apparently unaware of how close he had come to death. Return my property, all the documents you stole, and I'll ensure your end is quick. The same courtesy extends to Bishop, whose betrayal was particularly disappointing. Bishop stepped forward, making himself visible beside Reeves. Your definition of loyalty always was conveniently flexible, Maxwell? Blackwood's expression hardened at the sight of his former enforcer. As was yours, apparently. Tell me, how much did Reeves offer for your services? More than the small fortune I've paid over the years. Something far more valuable. Bishop replied, his cultured voice carrying an edge of genuine feeling, perhaps the first Reeves had heard from him. The truth about Marianne. The name landed like a physical blow. For the first time, Blackwood's composed facade cracked, revealing genuine shock beneath. You have no right to speak her name, he snarled, suddenly sounding less like a powerful railroad magnate and more like a wounded animal. I have every right, Bishop countered coldly, considering you ordered me to eliminate her when she threatened to expose your arrangement with the Mexican government. Blackwood's hand moved to his hidden sidearm. Lies. I kept the orders, Maxwell, your signature, your seal, alongside the payment receipts for every other life you've purchased over the years. Throughout this exchange, Emma had been moving silently between buildings, working her way closer to Blackwood's position. From her vantage point in the shadows beside the general store, she could see what others on the rooftops could not: additional men moving into position around the town's perimeter, using the distraction of Blackwood's parley to secure tactical advantages. She needed to warn the others, but a movement now would expose her position. Instead, she remained motionless, cataloging each new threat, calculating odds that grew increasingly dire with each passing moment. On the roof, the confrontation continued. You've overplayed your hand, Bishop, Blackwood said, his composure returning, though his eyes remained hard as flint. Even if you have such documents, they die with you tonight. Perhaps, Bishop acknowledged with unsettling calm, but copies have already been dispatched to 3 territorial governors, the War Department, and several newspaper editors of my acquaintance. Dead or alive, I've ensured your legacy is properly recorded. Rage contorted Blackwood's features as the full implications registered. His hand closed around his concealed revolver, drawing it with surprising speed for a man his age. Kill them all, he roared, firing at Bishop even as he wheeled his horse to retreat. The bullet struck Bishop in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Reeves dropped instantly, returning fire as Blackwood's hidden marksmen opened up on their position. Across town, the night erupted into chaos as the waiting forces charged from multiple directions. Elijah's traps triggered in rapid succession, shotgun blasts tearing through the first wave of attackers from the north. Screams and confused shouts filled the air as horses reared and men fell. From the water tower, Bishop's marksmen began methodically eliminating targets, their shots spaced with professional precision. Inside the Widow's Whisper, Harrison gathered a group of defenders. They're coming from all sides, he reported tersely. Elijah's traps won't hold them long. The church, Sarah realized suddenly. It's directly in their path if they break through the western barricade. Harrison nodded grimly. Take 4 men. Reinforce the position. As Sarah departed with her small force, Emma finally managed to slip back into the saloon through a rear entrance. Blood streaked her left arm where a bullet had grazed her during the initial exchange. Blackwood's gone, she reported, binding the wound with a strip of cloth torn from her shirt. Retreated east with 2 guards. Let him run, Harrison replied. We've got more immediate problems. Outside, the battle intensified. The initial advantage of surprise and prepared positions began to erode as Blackwood's superior numbers pressed from multiple directions. Defenders fell back toward the town center, maintaining discipline, but gradually ceding ground. On the roof, Reeves knelt beside Bishop, who sat propped against a chimney, pressing a wadded cloth against his bleeding shoulder. How bad? Reeves asked, reloading his rifle without looking down. I've had worse from shaving, Bishop replied, though the tightness in his voice belied the casual words. Blackwood was never much of a shot, always preferred others to do his killing. Can you still fire? Bishop's response was to draw his ornate revolver, with his uninjured arm checking the cylinder with practiced ease. Until my last breath. Good. Reeves peered over the roof's edge, assessing the battle below. Because it might come to that. The western barricade had fallen, Blackwood's men pushing steadily toward the church. Sarah and her small group had arrived just in time, engaging the attackers from flanking positions, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Inside the church, Vera positioned the other women behind what little cover the building offered: pews, the pulpit, a heavy communion table. When they come through that door, she instructed, her voice steady despite the gunfire outside. Aim low. They'll expect shots at chest height. Lily stood slightly apart, the small derringer clutched in white-knuckled hands. Her face, pale in the dim light filtering through stained glass, showed fear, but also a steely determination that reminded Vera forcefully of Emma. Remember, Vera told her quietly, one shot, make it count. Outside, Sarah ducked behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around her. 3 of her 4 men were already down, the 4th pinned behind a stack of crates that wouldn't withstand sustained fire. The church stood only 20 yards away, but crossing that distance under current conditions seemed impossible. Then from the shadows between buildings, Emma appeared. Moving with the fluid grace of a predator, she eliminated 2 of Blackwood's men with quick, precise shots before they registered her presence. A third turned toward the new threat, only to fall as Elijah, emerging from a different angle, placed a bullet squarely through his throat. The momentary advantage allowed Sarah to sprint for the church, the surviving member of her group following close behind. As they reached the building's relative safety, Elijah and Emma fell back, providing covering fire from separate positions. The others are falling back to the saloon, Sarah reported once, inside, breathing heavily from the exertion. Harrison's trying to consolidate our forces. How many left? Vera asked, never taking her eyes from the window she guarded. Maybe 15 still fighting. Could be fewer by now. Sarah checked her ammunition, 6 shots remaining in her revolver, none for the empty rifle she'd discarded during her run. They've got at least 30, probably more. Outside, Emma and Elijah found themselves cut off from the main group, forced to take cover in the undertaker's shop as a new wave of attackers pushed into the street between them and the saloon. Options? Elijah asked, wincing, as he reloaded, his hands still not entirely steady. Emma assessed their situation with clinical detachment. 2 windows, 1 door. Ammunition. 4 shells for the shotgun, 9 rounds for the Colt. 11 for my revolver. 2 knives. Emma's expression revealed nothing of her thoughts as she calculated their chances. Not enough to fight through to the others. So we hold here, Elijah concluded. Last stand at the undertaker's. Fitting, I suppose. A ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips. Always did appreciate irony. Their momentary respite ended as footsteps approached the shop, multiple men moving with tactical coordination, rather than rushing blindly. Emma positioned herself beside the door, while Elijah covered the windows, their movements synchronized despite their complicated history. The first attacker died the moment he crossed the threshold, Emma's knife finding his throat with surgical precision. The second fell to Elijah's shotgun blast, the sound deafening in the confined space. Then 3 more rushed in, simultaneously forcing them into close-quarters combat. Emma fought with the cold efficiency of a trained killer, each movement economical and lethal. Elijah, despite his recent ordeal, matched her intensity, if not her technique, his desperation lending strength to his blows. For a brief, violent moment, they seemed to be holding their own. Then a shot rang out from the doorway. Emma staggered, a bloom of crimson spreading across her side. Elijah roared in fury, emptying his Colt into the new threat, but the damage was done. Emma collapsed against the wall, her hand pressed to the wound as blood seeped between her fingers. Keep fighting, she ordered through gritted teeth, attempting to raise her revolver with her free hand. Before Elijah could respond, the night outside suddenly filled with new sounds, shouts, gunfire, the thunder of approaching hooves. For a moment he thought Blackwood had brought even more forces to bear. Then he recognized a voice calling commands, a woman's voice, authoritative and familiar. The hell, he muttered, risking a glance through the shattered window. What he saw defied immediate comprehension. Riders poured into the town from the western approach, dozens of them, women in the lead. They hit Blackwood's forces from behind, catching them in a deadly crossfire between the new arrivals and the town's defenders. Reinforcements! Emma gasped, a pained smile crossing her features. Right on time. You knew they were coming, Elijah asked, returning to her side and pressing a wadded bandana against her wound. Hoped. She winced as he applied pressure. Sent messages to women's groups in 3 counties, those who'd lost husbands, brothers' sons to Blackwood's expansion. Grieving women aren't soldiers, Elijah pointed out, though the sounds of battle outside suggested otherwise. Emma's smile widened slightly despite her pain. Grief makes for motivated fighters. The tide of battle shifted rapidly as the unexpected reinforcements pushed Blackwood's men into increasingly untenable positions. Caught between the newcomers and the town's defenders, their superior numbers quickly became a liability, creating confusion and crossfire in the narrow streets. From the roof of the Widow's Whisper, Reeves observed the changing dynamics with tactical appreciation. Beside him, Bishop had managed to stand despite his injury, his ornate revolver claiming targets with methodical precision. "You're doing?" Reeves asked, nodding toward the unexpected allies. "Not mine," Bishop replied, a note of genuine respect entering his voice. "Emma always did understand human motivation better than most of us." As Blackwood's forces began to scatter, retreating in disorganized groups rather than maintaining cohesion, Reeves spotted a familiar figure attempting to slip away through the eastern alley, Blackwood himself accompanied by a single remaining guard. "There," he said, pointing out the target to Bishop. The former Widowmaker leader sighted down his revolver, then lowered it deliberately. "He's yours, I believe. Personal matters should remain so." Reeves hesitated only briefly before making his decision. With quick economical movements, he descended from the roof and began moving through shadows toward Blackwood's escape route, leaving Bishop to provide covering fire from above. The railroad magnate had nearly reached the edge of town, his guards scanning frantically for threats as they prepared to mount horses tethered to a hitching post. Reeves approached silently from behind years of frontier experience, making his footfalls imperceptible even on the packed earth. The guards sensed something at the last moment, beginning to turn too late. Reeves' knife entered between his ribs with practiced precision, the man collapsing without a sound. Blackwood, unaware of his protector's demise, continued untying his horse. "Going somewhere?" Reeves asked, his voice calm despite the night's violence. Blackwood froze, then slowly turned. In the faint moonlight, his face appeared suddenly older, the arrogance replaced by something approaching fear. "Reeves." He straightened, attempting to reclaim his dignity. "I underestimated you. A mistake I won't repeat." "No," Reeves agreed. "You won't." Blackwood's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Reeves was faster, knocking the gun aside before it cleared the holster. With brutal efficiency, he drove Blackwood against the wall of the nearest building, forearm pressed against the older man's throat. "My father," Reeves said, his voice low and deadly, "begged for his family's safety before you had him hanged. I have the witness testimonies, the falsified orders, everything." Fear flickered in Blackwood's eyes, quickly masked by defiance. "Kill me then. It changes nothing. The railroad still comes. Progress is inevitable." "This isn't about progress." Reeves increased pressure on the man's throat, watching him struggle for air. "This is about justice." "Justice?" Blackwood wheezed a laugh despite his predicament. "There's no justice on the frontier, only survival, only power." For a moment, Reeves saw his father in his mind's eye, a principled man who had stood against corruption and paid with his life. The rage that had driven him for years surged anew, his free hand moving to his revolver. Then unbidden came another image, Jenkins dying in Elijah's arms, sacrificed to Reeves's own thirst for vengeance. The parallels were too stark to ignore the cycle of violence and retribution endlessly repeating. Slowly, deliberately, Reeves released pressure on Blackwood's throat, stepping back, though his revolver remained trained on the man's chest. "You're right," he said finally. "There is no justice here, only choices." Confusion crossed Blackwood's features. "What are you doing at breaking the cycle?" Reeves reached into his coat, extracting a folded document. "This is a signed confession from Bishop detailing your arrangement with foreign governments. Selling military secrets, treason Blackwood, hanging offense." Dawn broke over Redemption Creek like a fever, breaking pale light, washing away the darkness that had concealed the night's violence. The main street, once lined with hopeful businesses and modest homes, now resembled a battlefield from the war everyone was trying to forget. Bodies lay where they had fallen, some still clutching weapons in death-rigid hands. Shattered windows reflected the rising sun in broken patterns across blood-stained earth. The survivors moved through this aftermath like ghosts collecting their dead, tending the wounded, taking stock of what remained. In the Widow's Whisper, now serving as an impromptu infirmary, Sarah Hawkins worked tirelessly alongside several women from the reinforcement party. Her metal mask caught the early light as she moved between makeshift pallets, administering what comfort medicine and whiskey could provide. In a corner of the saloon, Maxwell Blackwood sat under guard, his immaculate suit now stained with the night's evidence. Two men with rifles stood nearby, never taking their eyes from the railroad magnate, despite their own exhaustion. Blackwood himself maintained a regal posture, despite his circumstances, observing the activity around him with detached interest, as if the devastation were merely an unexpected business outcome to be noted in a ledger. Reeves entered through the swinging doors, pausing to survey the scene. His face, already weathered by years of frontier hardship, now carried additional lines etched by the night's events. Blood had dried along his hairline from a wound sustained during the final push, and his movements betrayed the careful consideration of a man cataloging numerous injuries. Sarah approached, wiping blood-stained hands on a once white apron. 15 dead on our side, she reported without preamble. 23 wounded, 8 critically. Blackwood's men. At least 40 confirmed dead. The rest scattered into the desert. Her visible eye moved to the bound magnate. He hasn't spoken since you brought him in. He's waiting, Reeves replied, his voice low. Men like him always believe rescue is coming. Is it? Reeves shook his head slightly. Bishop's men are watching all approaches. If Blackwood had a contingency, they'd have triggered it by now. Sarah nodded, then hesitated before delivering her next piece of information. Emma's asking for you. Something flickered in Reeves's expression, a complex emotion not easily named. How bad? Bad enough. Sarah's tone softened slightly. She lost a lot of blood. Bullet punctured her lung. She'll live. If infection doesn't set in, if she rests. Sarah's mouth tightened. Big ifs out here. Reeves glanced toward the stairs leading to the rooms above. And Elijah hasn't left her side. Sarah's expression revealed nothing of her thoughts on this development. Harrison's with them now. With a nod of acknowledgement, Reeves moved toward the stairs. As he passed Blackwood, the railroad magnate spoke for the first time since his capture, voice low, intended for Reeves alone. This changes nothing you know. Despite his disheveled appearance, Blackwood's voice carried the same confident authority it had when addressing boards of directors or territorial governors. The railroad will still come. Progress doesn't bend to the will of individuals. Reeves paused, studying the older man with cold assessment. This was never about stopping progress. It was about stopping you. A distinction without difference. Blackwood smiled thinly. Cut off the head, another grows. Empire building isn't for the faint-hearted, Reeves, or the sentimental. Maybe. Reeves turned away, dismissing the conversation. We'll see what the territorial judge thinks of your philosophy. As he climbed the stairs, each step a negotiation with his battered body, Reeves allowed himself to fully register the cost of their victory. Beyond the physical toll, the dead, the wounded, the property destroyed, lay deeper consequences not yet fully revealed. Alliances formed in desperation, betrayals forgiven out of necessity, lines crossed that could never be uncrossed. The door to Emma's room stood partially open. Inside, Harrison Cooper sat beside the window, cleaning his rifle with the methodical precision that had become a ritual between battles. Elijah occupied a chair pulled close to the bed where Emma lay, pale, and still, her breathing shallow but steady. The young man looked up as Reeves entered, his expression a complex mixture of exhaustion, relief, and lingering anger. She's sleeping, Elijah said quietly, his voice rough from smoke and shouting. Doctor gave her laudanum for the pain. Reeves nodded, remaining near the doorway. Sarah says you've been here all night. Someone needed to watch her. Elijah's tone carried a defensive edge. Make sure she kept breathing. From his position by the window, Harrison spoke without looking up from his work. The girl's asking about her aunt. Lily. She's with the other women at the church. I'll let her know Emma's condition, Reeves offered. No need. Harrison reassembled his rifle with practiced movements. I'll go. Been sitting too long anyway. He stood slinging the weapon over his shoulder. As he passed Reeves, he added in a lower voice, "He needs to talk. Might as well be you." With Harrison gone, the room fell into uncomfortable silence. Elijah continued his vigil beside Emma, occasionally adjusting the blanket covering her wounded form. Reeves moved to the window, looking out over the damaged town, now brightening under the morning sun. "You sold Jenkins to Bishop." Elijah finally said the words, emerging like stones dislodged from a mountainside, the beginning of an avalanche long held in check. "Used him as currency for your revenge." Reeves didn't turn from the window. "Yes, he trusted you. We both did." Elijah's voice remained quiet but vibrated with controlled fury. "He died believing in you. A better death than he deserved," Reeves acknowledged. "Better than I deserve." "That's it." Elijah stood now, fists clenched at his sides. No denial, no justification. Reeves finally turned, meeting the younger man's accusing gaze directly. "Would either help?" "I want to understand how you live with it," Elijah demanded. "How you look at yourself each morning. How you justify sacrificing innocent lives for your personal vendetta." "I don't justify it." Reeves's voice remained level, though something in his eyes suggested depths of self-recrimination Elijah couldn't fully comprehend. "I live with it because the alternative is to die with it. And I'm not finished yet." "Finished with what? More revenge, more blood?" "With making it right." Reeves glanced toward Emma's unconscious form. "As right as it can be made." Elijah laughed, a harsh, bitter sound devoid of humor. "There's no making this right. Jenkins is still dead. Dozens more died last night. The town's half destroyed. And for what? So you could capture Blackwood, so you could feel your father's ghost might rest easier." "Not for me." Reeves moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "For those still living. For those who deserve a future not dictated by men like Blackwood." Before Elijah could respond, a soft voice interrupted from the bed. "Both of you. Too damn loud." Emma's eyes had opened, glazed with pain and medication, but unmistakably alert. She attempted to shift position, wincing as the movement pulled at her wound. "Stay still," Elijah ordered, immediately returning to her side. "You'll reopen it." "Been shot before?" She managed each word, clearly costing effort. "Survived worse." "Not by much," Reeves observed, approaching the foot of the bed. "Doctor says you're lucky." A ghost of Emma's usual sardonic smile touched her pale lips. "Not luck. Bad. Aim." Despite the gravity of the moment, Elijah found himself smiling in response, a reflexive reaction to her stubborn resilience. He reached for a cup of water on the bedside table, helping her take small sips. "Lily?" Emma asked once she'd drunk. "Safe," Reeves assured her. "At the church with the other women. Harrison's gone to tell her you're alive." Relief visibly washed through Emma's features. "The battle. We won. For certain definitions of winning," Elijah replied, unable to keep bitterness from his tone. "Blackwood's captured, his men either dead or scattered." "Bishop," Reeves answered this time, "wounded but alive. He and his remaining men are securing the perimeter, making sure Blackwood doesn't have reinforcements waiting to spring a rescue." Emma nodded slightly, processing this information. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, remained sharp as she studied the two men at her bedside. "You've been fighting," she observed. "About Jenkins." Elijah stiffened, but didn't deny it. Reeves merely inclined his head, neither confirmation nor rejection. "Truth deserves airing." Emma continued each sentence, punctuated by careful breaths. "All of it. You need to rest," Elijah insisted. "Need to finish this." Her hand moved weakly toward Reeves. "The documents. Where are they?" "Secure," he answered, "along with Bishop's evidence of Blackwood's treason." "Not those." Emma's frustration at her weakened state showed in the tightening of her jaw. "The other package. From Tucson." Reeves's expression changed subtly, a barely perceptible shift that nonetheless conveyed understanding. "It's safe, but now isn't the time. Now is only time we have." Emma's gaze moved between them, intensity burning through her physical fragility. "Elijah deserves whole truth about Jenkins, about you, about me." Before either man could respond, the door opened, revealing Sarah Hawkins. Her remaining visible eye took in the tableau with quick assessment. Bishop's back, she announced without preamble. Says there's a telegraph coming through from Santa Fe. Military dispatch. Reeves straightened. Blackwood's connections? Possibly. Sarah glanced toward Emma. He's asking for both of you. Says it concerns something called Operation Widowmaker. Emma closed her eyes briefly, a flicker of something like resignation passing across her features. Help me up, she said to Elijah. You can't stand, he protested. Then carry me. Her voice strengthened with determination. This involves all of us now. The main room of the Widow's Whisper had been cleared of wounded, now serving once more as the command center for their unlikely coalition. Bishop stood near the bar, his wounded shoulder professionally bandaged, his customary composure firmly in place, despite the ordeal of the previous night. Around the room, representatives from each faction gathered. Harrison Cooper returned from the church, Vera representing the women who had arrived as reinforcements, several of Bishop's remaining men, and a few townspeople who had emerged as leaders during the battle. Elijah entered, carrying Emma, her arm around his shoulders, face pale but determined. He settled her carefully in a chair near the center of the room, positioning himself protectively at her side. Reeves followed, taking in the assembled group with a tactical assessment that had become second nature. What's this about? He asked Bishop directly. The former Widowmaker leader nodded toward a piece of paper on the bar. Telegraph from Colonel James Thornton, Territorial Command. Apparently our activities have attracted official attention. Reeves picked up the telegram, scanning its contents with growing concern. They're sending a military detachment, arriving by train tomorrow. The first train on the new line? Bishop confirmed, a hint of irony coloring his cultured voice. Quite the symbolic gesture. They're coming for Blackwood, Harrison asked. Among others. Bishop's gaze shifted significantly to Emma. It seems Operation Widowmaker has become a matter of national security. Emma accepted this information with a slight nod, as if it merely confirmed something long expected. Thornton was always thorough. Someone want to explain what Operation Widowmaker is? Elijah demanded, his patience visibly wearing thin. And why the military suddenly involved? Emma and Bishop exchanged a long look, former colleagues, sharing a history others could only glimpse. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice stronger now despite her injury. After the war, certain elements within the government formed specialized units, deniable assets. People who could operate outside normal channels handled problems that couldn't be addressed through official means. Assassins, Elijah translated bluntly. Intelligence gatherers, Bishop corrected smoothly, occasionally with extreme prejudice. The Widowmakers weren't just Bishop's creation, Emma continued. They were sanctioned unofficially by men high in the War Department, men concerned about foreign interests gaining footholds in America's Western expansion. Reeves' expression darkened as understanding dawned. And Blackwood was selling information to these foreign interests. Among other services, Bishop confirmed, his railroad wasn't just connecting east to west, it was creating a network for moving sensitive information technology, even weapons, across territories with minimal oversight. So the military knew, Harrison asked, incredulous. They knew what Blackwood was doing and let it happen. They suspected, Emma clarified, but couldn't prove it without compromising their own operations. So they allowed Bishop to place operatives close to Blackwood, including me. A heavy silence fell as the implications settled over the group. Elijah stared at Emma, reevaluating everything he thought he knew about her betrayal. You were never really Bishop's agent, he said slowly. You were working for the government all along. It's complicated. Emma shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at her wound. I was Bishop's recruit initially, then Thornton's asset. Then for a time I was simply trying to survive, to protect what little family I had left. And now, Reeves asked the question, carrying weight beyond its simplicity. Emma met his gaze directly. Now I'm trying to end something that should have been stopped long ago. Before the conversation could continue, the saloon doors swung open. A young rider, dust-covered from hard travel, stumbled in. Train's coming, he announced breathlessly. Black smoke on the horizon, moving fast toward the new station at Eagle Pass. Bishop straightened, instantly alert. That's 30 miles east. They shouldn't be this close already. Unless they were already en route when the telegram was sent, Reeves concluded grimly. This isn't a response to our situation. It's something else. Or someone else. Emma struggled to her feet, refusing Elijah's assistance. Blackwood, where is he? Sarah, who had been unusually quiet during the preceding conversation, moved quickly to check the corner where their prisoner had been secured. She returned moments later, her expression confirming their fears before she spoke. Gone. Along with one of the guards. Damn it! Harrison slammed his fist against the bar. He must have had a man among us all along. Aid more than one, Bishop surmised coolly. The question is how many and what their next move will be. Reeves was already moving toward the door. We need to secure the town, now. Harrison, get everyone who can still fight armed and ready. Sarah, move the wounded to the church. It's the most defensible building. Bishop, your men need to... He stopped abruptly as the distant but unmistakable sound of an explosion reached them. Rushing outside, the group witnessed a plume of dark smoke rising from the direction of the water tower, their primary source in a critical defensive position. It's starting, Emma said quietly, having followed despite her injury. Blackwood's contingency plan. Which is what exactly? Elijah demanded. The answer came from Bishop, his voice carrying the certainty of a man intimately familiar with the strategies being deployed. Scorched earth. If he can't have the town, no one will. As if confirming his assessment, two more explosions sounded in quick succession, these from opposite ends of the settlement. Flames immediately began to rise from the livery stable and the mercantile strategic points that would spread fire quickly through the predominantly wooden structures. He's burning us out, Sarah realized, horror evident in her voice. All of us. Reeves' expression hardened into resolve. Not if we stop him first. Harrison, organize fire brigades. Bishop, your men know explosives, find and disarm any remaining charges. Elijah, get Emma and the other wounded to the church, then help Sarah evacuate everyone else. And you? Elijah asked, already moving to support Emma's weakened form. I'm going after Blackwood. Reeves checked his revolver methodically. He'll be heading for the train. It's his only escape route now. Not alone, you're not, Bishop interjected, drawing his ornate sidearm despite his injured shoulder. This has become a matter of professional pride. Take horses from the back paddock, Harrison advised, faster than trying to navigate the chaos on foot. As the group dispersed to their assigned tasks, Emma caught Reeves's arm, holding him back momentarily. Blackwood won't be alone, she warned, her voice low and urgent. He always maintains a personal security detail separate from his main forces, elite, fanatically loyal. How many? 4 usually, former military, special training. Her grip tightened on his sleeve. And Jackson, he'll have the package from Tucson, the real evidence. He must have taken it during the confusion. Reeves covered her hand with his own, a brief gesture of acknowledgement. We'll get it back. Not just for the case against him, Emma insisted, intensity burning through her physical weakness. For Elijah, for all of us. The truth has to come out now. A wordless understanding passed between them. History acknowledged, consequences accepted. With a final nod, Reeves moved away, joining Bishop as they headed for the rear paddock, where horses had been corralled. Left behind, Emma watched them go, her expression a complex mixture of pain, determination, and something deeper, a knowledge of wheels set in motion long ago now, approaching their inevitable conclusion. The desert stretched endlessly under the midday sun, heat rippling above the baked earth like phantom water. Reeves and Bishop rode hard, pushing their mounts to the limits of endurance. The newly laid railroad tracks provided a clear guide toward their destination, Eagle Pass Station, where the first ceremonial train was reportedly approaching. Neither man spoke as they rode, conserving energy and focusing on the pursuit. Despite their temporary alliance, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Too much history, too many betrayals and counter-betrayals to be easily set aside. They were predators, sharing a hunt by necessity, not choice. After nearly an hour of punishing pace, they crested a rise overlooking Eagle Pass. Below, the newly constructed station stood in stark contrast to the surrounding wilderness, a monument to civilization's encroachment, built at Blackwood's direction, using materials from his own factories and labor from his own workforce. More significantly, a train had indeed arrived, belching black smoke as it idled at the platform. Even from a distance, the military presence was evident, uniformed men patrolling the perimeter, a mounted Gatling gun positioned defensively near the water tower. Not a standard detachment, Bishop observed, lowering the spyglass he'd been using to survey the scene. These are Colonel Thornton's Special Operations Unit, elite troops hand-selected. Friends of yours? Reeves asked the question, carrying an edge beneath its surface neutrality. Former colleagues, Bishop corrected smoothly, which presents both advantages and complications. Meaning they'll recognize me, and possibly you by description? Bishop returned the spyglass to his coat pocket. Thornton has files on everyone connected to Operation Widowmaker. Detailed dossiers, psychological profiles. Reeves absorbed this information with the same stoic acceptance he applied to all unpleasant realities. And Blackwood, would they have reached the station already? If they pushed their horses to death, perhaps. Bishop scanned the surrounding terrain with professional assessment. More likely they're approaching from the north, using the ridgeline for cover. As if summoned by his analysis, movement caught their attention, riders descending a narrow trail from the northern heights, moving with the practiced coordination of men accustomed to operating as a unit. Even at a distance, Blackwood's distinctive white hat was visible among them. 4 escorts, Reeves counted. Just as Emma said. His personal guard, Bishop confirmed. Former Pinkerton agents, skilled, disciplined, and extremely well paid for their loyalty. They watched as Blackwood's group reached the station perimeter. A brief exchange occurred between the escorts and the military guards, followed by Blackwood himself being escorted inside the station building. His guards remained outside, positioned strategically around the entrance. He's seeking Thornton's protection, Bishop surmised, claiming government sanction for his activities. Will it work? Depends on what evidence he can offer in exchange for immunity. Bishop's expression darkened slightly. Blackwood has always understood the value of information as currency. Reeves studied the situation below with tactical calculation. We need to get inside that station. A direct approach would be suicide, Bishop pointed out. Between Blackwood's guards and Thornton's troops, we'd be cut down before reaching the platform. Then we don't approach directly. Reeves nodded toward the eastern side of the station complex where supply wagons were being unloaded. Service entrance. Less visibility, fewer guards. Bishop followed his gaze, assessing the potential infiltration route. Possible, though we'd still need a distraction to draw attention away from that area. We have one. Reeves pointed toward the horizon behind them where a dust cloud was now visible. Riders approaching at speed from the direction of Redemption Creek. Reinforcements. Bishop raised the spyglass, again studying the approaching group. Harrison Cooper, he identified, and Elijah. Several others. They must have followed after securing the town. Or after failing to, Reeves added grimly. Either way, their arrival will create the diversion we need. The 2 men descended from their vantage point, circling wide to approach the station from the eastern flank. They left their horses concealed in a dry wash, proceeding on foot through sparse vegetation that provided minimal cover. The sun beat down mercilessly, sweat soaking through their already trail-worn clothing as they advanced in the tactical silence of experienced hunters. Reaching the edge of the station yard, they paused behind a stack of lumber, observing the patterns of guards and workers. The service area bustled with activity supplies being transferred from wagons to storage areas, workers shouting instructions, military personnel performing cursory inspections of incoming materials. Wait for the diversion, Bishop murmured. Then move quickly. The station office will be at the north end of the main building. That's where Thornton will have established his command post. And Blackwood, with him, presenting his case. Bishop checked his ornate revolver with practiced movements. We'll have moments at most before the alarm is raised. They didn't wait long. Harrison's group arrived with the dramatic flair of desperate men riding directly to the station's main entrance and demanding entry. Their voices carried clearly across the yard accusations against Blackwood, claims of evidence regarding treason, demands to speak with the commanding officer. As predicted, attention shifted immediately toward the commotion. Guards moved to contain the situation. Workers paused to observe the unfolding drama, and the disciplined routine of the station momentarily fractured. Now, Reeves said, already moving. They slipped into the service entrance with practiced stealth, navigating through storage rooms and narrow corridors. The interior of the station maintained a precarious coolness compared to the desert heat outside, though the air hung heavy with the sense of oil sweat and fresh timber. Occasional shouts from outside indicated the continuing distraction provided by Harrison's group. Approaching the northern section of the building, they encountered their first obstacle, two military guards, positioned outside what appeared to be an office door. Unlike the regular troops patrolling the perimeter, these men wore specialized insignia and carried themselves with a heightened awareness of elite soldiers. "Thornton's personal security," Bishop whispered, drawing back around a corner. "They'll recognize me immediately." Reeves assessed their options with cold calculation. "We need a different approach." Before Bishop could respond, the office door opened. Both men pressed further into concealment as voices emerged from within Blackwood's cultured tones, contrasting with the clipped authoritative cadence of what must be Colonel Thornton. "Understand your position, Maxwell," the military man was saying. "But the documentation is insufficient. I need the complete package." "You'll have it," Blackwood assured him smoothly. "Once my safety is guaranteed. Written immunity passage east on the next train, and protection from these vigilantes." "The department doesn't negotiate with traitors," Thornton replied, voice hardening. "You'll provide the complete Tucson files immediately, or I'll personally see you handed back to those waiting outside." A tense silence followed this ultimatum. Then, with evident reluctance, Blackwood spoke again. "Very well. The files are secure in my private car. I'll retrieve them myself." "You'll be escorted," Thornton countered. "Lieutenant Davis, accompany Mr. Blackwood to his car. Ensure he returns promptly." Footsteps moved away down the corridor in the opposite direction. Reeves and Bishop exchanged glances, silently recalibrating their plan. "The private car will be at the rear of the train," Bishop murmured. "Separate entrance, likely guarded by Blackwood's remaining men." "Then we split up," Reeves decided. "You approach Thornton directly. Your history gives you standing he might recognize. While you intercept Blackwood at his private car," Bishop concluded, nodding approval of the strategy. "A sound plan, if rather optimistic about my reception." "Thornton needs what Blackwood has," Reeves reasoned. "You can offer an alternative source for the same information." Bishop smiled thinly. "Pragmatism, always the currency of our profession." He checked his timepiece, a gold hunter case that seemed incongruously refined given their current circumstances. 2 minutes, then we move." Reeves nodded once, then slipped away, retracing their path before finding a side exit that would allow him to circle around to the train itself. Behind him, Bishop straightened his clothing as best he could, adjusted his injured shoulder, and prepared to face a former commander under less than ideal circumstances. Blackwood's private car stood apart from the standard military carriages that comprised the majority of the train, a custom-built testament to wealth and privilege with polished wood exterior, brass fittings, and curtained windows that revealed nothing of the interior. A single guard stood at the steps leading to the entrance, while Lieutenant Davis waited impatiently as Blackwood unlocked the ornate door. Reeves approached from the blind side of the train, using the main carriages as cover until he reached a position directly opposite the private car. Between him and his target lay 20 yards of open ground, a deadly distance with no concealment. Fortune, however, intervened in the form of a sudden commotion from the station's main entrance. Harrison's group had apparently escalated their demands, voices raised in what sounded like a brewing confrontation. The guard at Blackwood's car turned instinctively toward the noise, providing the momentary distraction Reeves needed. He moved swiftly across the exposed ground, reaching the far side of the private car, just as Blackwood and Davis disappeared inside. The guard remained at his post, attention, now divided between the distant commotion and his immediate responsibility. Reeves assessed his options with the cold calculation of a predator. Direct confrontation would create noise, drawing unwanted attention. Instead, he circled beneath the car, using the undercarriage for cover, as he positioned himself near the opposite end where a secondary entrance likely existed for service access. His instincts proved correct. A smaller door was indeed located at the car's rear, locked but less substantial than the main entrance. With practiced efficiency, Reeves extracted a thin metal tool from his boot, a legacy from less legitimate occupations in his past, and manipulated the simple mechanism. The lock yielded with a soft click. Inside, the private car epitomized luxury. Thick carpets muffled footsteps, leather seating gleamed with regular polishing, and wood paneling created an atmosphere of refined civilization, completely at odds with the wilderness beyond the windows. Voices drifted from the forward compartment, Blackwood directing Davis to a concealed safe behind an oil painting of a European landscape. Reeves moved silently through the car, drawing his revolver. As he reached the partially open door to the main compartment, he could see Blackwood kneeling before the now exposed safe, turning the dial with practiced movements, while Davis stood watching, hand resting on his holstered sidearm. "The military has been monitoring your activities for some time, Mr. Blackwood," the lieutenant was saying, professional, despite his evident distaste. "Your arrangements with foreign investors cross lines that cannot be ignored." "Crossed lines?" Blackwood repeated, a note of genuine amusement in his voice as the safe door swung open. "My dear Lieutenant, I didn't cross lines. I erased them and redrew the map according to new realities." He extracted a leather portfolio from the safe, rising to his feet with the dignified movements of a man accustomed to deference. "What you call treason," he continued, "future historians will recognize as visionary international cooperation. The American empire cannot sustain itself in isolation. New partnerships must be forged, new arrangements established." "That's not your decision to make," Davis countered firmly. "No," Blackwood smiled thinly. "Then whose politicians, who can barely comprehend the forces reshaping our world, military men, whose vision extends only to the next battlefield?" He patted the portfolio. "In here are communications from your own superiors, Lieutenant, men who understand the true nature of power and progress." Before Davis could respond, Reeves stepped into the doorway, revolver leveled. "Drop it," he ordered, voice carrying the absolute certainty of a man prepared to fire. Both men turned sharply, Davis instinctively reaching for his weapon, before recognizing the disadvantage of his position. Blackwood showed less surprise, his expression suggesting he had half expected this development. "Mr. Reeves," he greeted with remarkable composure, "your persistence continues to impress, if not your timing." "The portfolio," Reeves directed, gesturing with his revolver. "On the table now." Davis looked between them, professional assessment, quickly identifying Reeves as the greater immediate threat. "This is a military operation, civilian. Lower your weapon." "This stopped being a military operation when Blackwood sold out your Western defenses to the highest bidder," Reeves replied, never taking his eyes from Blackwood. "The portfolio. Last warning." With deliberate slowness, Blackwood placed the leather case on the polished table between them. "You realize, of course, that taking this by force undermines any legal standing it might have in a military tribunal." "I'm not concerned with tribunals," Reeves stated flatly. "Only justice." "Ah, justice." Blackwood pronounced the word as if sampling an exotic but dubious delicacy. "That nebulous concept invoked when law proves inconvenient." Davis, recognizing the volatile nature of the standoff, attempted to reassert control. "Both of you stand down. This evidence will be processed through proper channels." "He's right, Reeves," Blackwood agreed smoothly. "Allow the lieutenant to take the portfolio to Colonel Thornton. Let military justice run its course." Reeves recognized the strategy, Blackwood attempting to maneuver the portfolio into official channels where his influence might still protect him. Before he could respond, the lieutenant made his decision, reaching for the case with one hand while keeping the other near his holstered weapon. "This is now under military jurisdiction," Davis declared. "Both of you will accompany me to Colonel Thornton immediately." The standoff might have continued, but the sound of approaching footsteps on the car's exterior steps interrupted the tableau. All three men tensed attention, shifting toward the main entrance as it swung open. Bishop entered first, his cultured posture unchanged despite his injured shoulder. Behind him came a military officer whose bearing and insignia marked him unmistakably as Colonel Thornton, a man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and the weathered features of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions in harsh environments. "Quite the reunion," Bishop observed mildly, taking in the scene with professional assessment. "All the principal players assembled for the final act." Thornton stepped forward, his gaze moving between Reeves and Blackwood, before settling on the portfolio. "Lieutenant Davis, secure that evidence." Davis moved to comply, but Reeves maintained his position, revolver unwavering. "Not until we establish terms." "You're in no position to negotiate, Mr. Reeves." Thornton replied, his tone suggesting this was merely an observation rather than a threat. Though I understand your reluctance to trust military authority given your history, the colonel's casual reference to his background caught Reeves momentarily off guard, a reminder of Bishop's earlier comment about detailed dossiers. The portfolio contains more than evidence of Blackwood's treason, Reeves stated, recovering quickly. It holds the truth about Operation Widowmaker, about Jenkins, about Emma Reynolds and her real role in all of this. Thornton's expression revealed nothing but Blackwood's composure, finally cracked a flicker of genuine concern crossing his features before he controlled it. Irrelevant side matters, the railroad magnate dismissed. Ancient history better left buried for all concerned. Including you, Reeves challenged. The portfolio proves you orchestrated Jenkins' death, that you manipulated both Bishop and me into eliminating your enemies under the guise of military necessity. Thornton's gaze sharpened. Is this true, Bishop? The former Widowmaker leader inclined his head slightly. The evidence suggests Blackwood was running his own operation within our operation, using Widowmaker resources for personal vendettas and business advantages. Preposterous! Blackwood scoffed, though his confident facade had developed noticeable cracks. Colonel, you know my contributions to national security, my sacrifices for the greater good. I know you're a pragmatist, Maxwell, Thornton replied evenly, and that pragmatism has occasionally aligned with our interests. But manipulating a military operation for personal gain? He shook his head slightly. That crosses lines even I can't ignore. The tension in the private car had shifted subtly but significantly. Blackwood now stood effectively alone, his usual networks of influence and protection unraveling in real time. His eyes darted between the men surrounding him, calculating options, with the desperation of someone watching escape routes close one by one. The full truth needs to come out, Reeves insisted, addressing Thornton directly. Not just about Blackwood's treason, but about Jenkins, about Emma Reynolds, about the real purpose of Operation Widowmaker. Some truths are classified for good reason, Mr. Reeves, Thornton countered. National security became a convenient excuse for murder. Reeves finished. For sacrifice of innocent lives in service to powerful men's ambitions. Before Thornton could respond, commotion erupted outside, shouts, the thunder of approaching horses, the unmistakable sound of conflict reaching even the insulated confines of the private car. Lieutenant Davis moved to the window, peering through the curtains. Sir, it appears the situation at the station has escalated. Armed civilians are engaging with our troops. Harrison, Reeves realized, and Elijah. Blackwood seized the momentary distraction, lunging for a concealed compartment beneath the polished desk. His hand emerged clutching a small derringer, a last resort weapon that nonetheless posed deadly threat in the confined space. Enough, he snarled, desperation, stripping away his cultivated veneer of civilization. The portfolio comes with me. I still have contacts waiting. Arrangements made. The derringer swung toward Thornton, the highest value target in the room, but Bishop moved with the lethal speed that had made him legendary among frontier operatives. His hand closed around Blackwood's wrist, forcing the weapon upward as it discharged the bullet, embedding harmlessly in the car's ornate ceiling. In the same fluid motion, Bishop drove his knee into Blackwood's midsection, doubling the older man over, before delivering a precise strike to the base of his skull. Blackwood collapsed to the carpeted floor, the derringer skittering away beneath a leather settee. Some habits persist beyond retirement, Bishop observed, mildly straightening his jacket with his uninjured arm. Thornton regarded his former operative with something approaching approval before turning to Davis. Secure Mr. Blackwood and prepare him for transport. He'll be returning east to face charges. And the portfolio? Reeves asked, his revolver now lowered, but still in hand. The colonel considered him with the measured assessment of a man accustomed to weighing lives against larger, strategic objectives. What exactly do you want, Mr. Reeves? The truth, he answered simply. For Elijah Cooper, for Emma Reynolds, for everyone whose lives were destroyed by this operation. Truth rarely brings comfort, Thornton warned, particularly in matters like these. Comfort isn't the objective, Reeves replied. Justice is. A tense silence filled the private car, broken only by the distant sounds of conflict at the station, and Blackwood's shallow breathing as he lay unconscious on the floor. Finally, Thornton reached a decision, nodding once with military crispness. "Lieutenant, to take charge of Mr. Blackwood. Bishop assists the lieutenant." As the men moved to comply, Thornton turned back to Reeves. "You and I will review the portfolio contents, together. Determine what can be disclosed without compromising ongoing operations." It wasn't a complete victory, but Reeves recognized it as the best offer likely to emerge from the situation. He holstered his weapon and nodded his acceptance. "Then let's begin," Thornton said, reaching for the leather portfolio that contained so many buried secrets, and perhaps finally a measure of justice for those who had suffered in silence. 3 days later, Redemption Creek began the slow process of rebuilding. The fires Blackwood's men had started had been contained before consuming the entire town, though several buildings stood as charred skeletons against the desert sky. The main street had been cleared of debris bodies, properly buried, and a tentative normalcy established, though no one who had lived through the battle remained quite the same. The Widow's Whisper had survived largely intact, its adobe walls more resistant to fire than the wooden structure surrounding it. Sarah Hawkins had reopened for business, almost immediately recognizing the town's need for somewhere to gather, to drink, to process the violent events that had transformed their community. At a corner table, Elijah Cooper sat with Emma Reynolds, whose recovery continued to progress despite the severity of her wound. Her niece Lily sat beside her, occasionally assisting when Emma's strength faltered, but otherwise maintaining the watchful silence that had become her hallmark. The saloon doors swung open, admitting Reeves and Harrison. They made their way to the table, Harrison carrying a leather portfolio identical to the one from Blackwood's private car. "Colonel Thornton left this morning," Reeves reported, settling into an empty chair, "taking Blackwood east for trial." "And Bishop?" Emma asked, her voice stronger than it had been days earlier. "Gone as well," Harrison answered. "Said something about professional courtesy requiring his testimony. He'll disappear before reaching any courtroom," Emma predicted with the certainty of someone who knew Bishop's methods intimately. "Too many secrets at risk." Reeves placed the portfolio on the table between them. "Thornton left this. Copies of the relevant documents. Redacted but enough to establish the truth." Elijah stared at the leather case as if it might contain some malevolent force. "Jenkins, it's all there," Reeves confirmed quietly. "The original orders, the real mission parameters, the manipulation by Blackwood to serve his own ends." "And your involvement?" Elijah pressed, meeting Reeves' gaze directly. "That too." No evasion, no justification, simply acknowledgement. Emma reached for the portfolio with slightly trembling fingers. "He included the Tucson files?" Reeves nodded. "Your complete operational history, the real reason you were assigned to infiltrate the Widowmakers, your reports to Thornton throughout." A heavy silence fell over the table as the weight of these revelations settled upon them. Lily watched the adults with wary eyes, too young to fully comprehend the complexities, but old enough to recognize their importance. "Truth rarely brings comfort," Emma murmured, echoing Thornton's earlier warning. "But secrets kill more surely than bullets." Elijah took the portfolio from her hands, his expression unreadable. "I'll read it alone first, then decide what comes next." No one attempted to dissuade him. As he rose and left the saloon, the leather case tucked securely under his arm. The remaining group sat in contemplative silence until Sarah approached, placing glasses and a bottle of her finest whiskey before them. "On the house," she said, her visible eye taking in their solemn expressions. "Seems appropriate." Harrison poured measures for each of them, raising his glass in a simple toast. "To Jenkins, and all the others who didn't live to see this day." They drank the liquor, burning a path that momentarily eclipsed deeper pains. Outside, the sounds of hammering and sawing filled the air as Redemption Creek continued its transformation. No longer merely a town on Blackwood's railroad line, but a community forged in fire and blood with its own identity emerging from the ashes. "What now?" Harrison asked the question they had all been avoiding. Reeves glanced toward the saloon doors where Elijah had departed. "That depends on what he decides after reading the truth." "Truth isn't justice," Emma observed quietly, "but it's a beginning." Sarah, who had remained nearby, offered her own perspective. "This town needs rebuilding. New leadership, new purpose now that Blackwood's gone." "The railroad will still come," Harrison pointed out. Progress doesn't stop for individuals, as Blackwood himself was fond of saying. No, Reeves agreed, but individuals determine what that progress means, what it costs, who benefits. The conversation paused as the saloon doors opened once more. Elijah stood framed in the doorway, the portfolio still clutched in his hands. His expression revealed nothing of his thoughts as he crossed to their table. Without speaking, he placed the leather case before Reeves. Then with deliberate movements, he removed his revolver and set it on the table as well. Not as a threat, but as a statement. I understand now, he said simply, his voice carrying neither forgiveness nor condemnation. About Jenkins. About all of it. The tension that had built with his entrance released slightly, though no one spoke, sensing he had more to say. Jenkins died believing in something larger than himself, Elijah continued. Manipulated, yes, used by men with their own agendas. But in the end, he chose to stand against something wrong, something corrupt. That's the part I'll remember. He looked directly at Reeves, then at Emma, his gaze carrying the weight of judgment without its sting. As for the rest, we've all made choices we can't undo, written stories in blood that can't be washed clean. The question is what story we write next. Oh, with that, he reclaimed his revolver, holstering it with the practiced movement of a man who had crossed an invisible threshold between youth and whatever comes after. Without waiting for response, he turned and exited the saloon steps, purposeful, as he moved toward the ongoing rebuilding efforts outside. The remaining group exchanged glances, understanding without words the significance of what had just transpired. Not forgiveness exactly, but something perhaps more valuable: acceptance of complex, painful truth, and the choice to move forward carrying that knowledge rather than being defined by it. He'll be all right, Harrison said, a father's pride evident beneath his gruff exterior. Better than all right, Sarah added. He'll lead. This town will need that now. Reeves drained his glass, setting it down with quiet finality. And we'll help him, all of us, in whatever way we can. Emma nodded agreement, her hand unconsciously moving to her healing wound, a physical reminder of costs paid and debt still owed. Beside her, Lily observed the adults with growing understanding, perhaps recognizing that something significant had been resolved, even if the resolution bore little resemblance to the justice found in children's stories. Outside, the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting Redemption Creek in golden shadow. From the ashes of conflict, something new was emerging, not perfect, not unmarked by the violence of its creation, but carrying within it the possibility of something better than what had come before. As Reeves moved to the saloon doors, gazing out at the town's transformation, a voice in his memory echoed what would become the settlement's unofficial motto in the years ahead. Maybe justice ain't a bullet. Maybe it's what you build after the smoke clears. The rebuilding had begun. The desert remembers what men try to forget. As the last embers die in what remains of Redemption Creek, the survivors stand between ruins and rebirth. Blood has dried on the sand, bodies have been laid to rest, and the truth that most dangerous of weapons now lies exposed to the harsh light of day. Some found justice in these ashes, though not the kind they sought when vengeance first kindled in their hearts. Others found something harder to grasp, the bitter clarity that comes when myths collapse and heroes reveal their scars. No one walks away unchanged when empire builders fall. The railroad will still come. Steel will still cut across ancient lands. Progress marches forward with indifferent precision. But now those who remain understand the true price of civilization's advance, not measured in dollars or deeds, but in the silent spaces where friends once stood. As Redemption Creek rebuilds board by board and soul by soul, the question hangs in the air, like gun smoke after battle. Is justice found in what we destroy, or in what we choose to build from the wreckage? Perhaps the answer lies not in bullets or documents, but in the quiet moments between survivors who carry both truth and ghosts forward into an uncertain dawn. Some say the West was won with guns and gold. The wise know better.